Here we are on Cavern of Racing.
Yeah, I was explaining racing in the USA to Jared because I'm a
Yeah.
foreigner and I know American racing better than Jared.
Yeah, I like what I know about. Well, I know my sister watches NASCAR and tells me about it, so I know about NASCAR, but I don't know about all the other stuff that goes on in racing. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of car culture over here, so there's a
Yeah,
lot of races.
and then you have World of Outlaws, which is a
World of
great name.
Outlaws.
It's a great name. They're winged sprints. So the United States Auto Club, they have non-winged sprints, which are the based on what IndyCar used to be in the 50s.
Good evening,
And
Mind the Comics.
mind the comics, he doesn't know anything about racing either.
What do you call those? It's not racing when they have like the monster trucks that. I guess they do some racing now with those monster trucks. They
Yeah,
have
but
the, but it's
it's a
more
bit
of an
like pro.
exhibition, right? They have those big where the monster
Yeah,
trucks get air and the moguls that the monster trucks
yeah.
go
If
over.
there's any sort of competition involved, it's pretty much like pro wrestling.
Ah, okay.
They're fun to watch.
Hmm.
They are. Demolition derbies, not really. Monster trucks, yeah. But you watch one or two monster truck events. Make sure you buy a hot dog, and then you go home and you can. While if you watch a NASCAR race, you can watch every NASCAR race.
Yeah. Good evening, Tit Goblin. Good evening, Comic Crack. Good evening, Sleepy Reader, the Cavern of Car Fiends.
Damien, I always wanted to know how far do you live from Delta Park? Because that's where the
Delta.
Portland Raceway is.
Ah, the Portland Raceway.
It's Portland
Raceway.
Raceway is one of my favorite races in the IndyCar schedule.
Good evening, Comics
Back in the
Unlimited.
80s, it used to be called the Budweiser GI Joe's 200. Now it's just the Portland Grand Prix.
Mind the
Yeah,
Comics followed Formula One up to 94.
yeah. Him
Then
and
he
every
got
Portuguese.
disillusioned with it? What?
No, Ayrton Senna died.
Ah, okay.
Senna was a Brazilian driver, three-time world champion, and he died in the San Marino Grand Prix on May 1st, 1994, and changed Formula One forever.
Probably a 20-minute drive.
Hmm.
Good evening, 62 Lefty Blues. Good evening. Well, Wilson caught COVID at the Comic Con, at the New York
Oh,
Comic Con.
really?
Yeah, he posted that on Facebook on, I think it was Monday or Tuesday. So I don't know if we'll be seeing him tonight.
Well, okay. Well,
He
unless
said
he's feeling.
he thought
How's
he
he
had a
feeling?
cold, and it turned out he tested positive for COVID. I was like, oh.
Okay. So he's not feeling well.
So yeah, I assume that's why he's not here. He's not feeling well.
Mhm.
Never been there, but for some reason I thought it was a dog racing place.
No, you have a 2 mile racing track, which is used for the IndyCar Portland Grand Prix and for the Rose Cup races, which, depending on what the promoter wants, it's either an event for classic racing cars or for whatever it is that Stefan Rattel's U.S. operations are running that year. But it's usually for classics.
There's a little oval track near me up in Orange County, New York. I don't know what its name is, but I know that my nephew and his father and his brother sometimes went up there. I don't. It's just a little local oval track that has races at it.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with. So I don't know the names of most short tracks. Although if you keep giving me names, I might recognize one. In lower New York, I really don't know.
Yeah.
There used to be a. Not sure. Is there still there? In the New York Fairgrounds in Syracuse, they used to do IndyCar races, which after the separation between asphalt races and paved races and dirt races, they sit with the United States Auto Club, the Silver Crown events. But I don't know if they still use the track. They got rid of the Indiana Fairgrounds racetrack this year, which a lot of people were angry about. But they have the reason they did races at the fairgrounds is because they had horse racing tracks, and in the beginning of the 20th century, when they started racing cars, the the easiest place to find to hold a car race was where the horses raced.
Wow. Huh. And tit goblins not allowed here. I've only driven a car once in my life. I'll go and join the walking. Oh, what is where does he? I think he lives in Canada, right? In like St. John's or something. Is that a pedestrian city? Because there's pedestrian city because there's people in like New York City who have never driven.
Right.
Because they take the subway everywhere and the buses. But I don't know how many, like there aren't really pedestrian cities in the United States. So I was wondering if what Canadian one is.
I wouldn't think that's the case in Newfoundland, unless you know how to drive a boat, a fishing boat.
I've been reading Mad Woman of Sacred Heart, oversized hardcover from Humanoids the past week, and it's epic. Modio and Jodorowsky.
Yeah, but the U.S. cover is different from the cover used in the rest of the world because they enlarged the image so it would cut out the boobs.
I never read all the way through when Dark Horse put it out, and being 60 now, it is hilarious. Like that for me, that was Asterius Polyp. I always found that. I think that came out in like 2005 or 10. I can't remember. But when I first bought Asterius Polyp, I was younger than the character. And then when I read it a few years ago again, I was older than the character. And I think I'd liked it better the second time around. I'm like, is that because I'm older than the character now? I don't know. Yeah. Shift gear versus automatic is a big difference between Europe and US, along with narrow city roads.
Yeah, we all know how to drive stick. In fact, when we go to driver's ed, we don't take our own cars or our dad's cars. They have their own cars so that the teacher can take the wheel if necessary. So we all learn how to drive stick.
Stick? I'm like, get that 1920s technology out of here. I'm not interested. Give me an automatic transmission.
You know that the automatic transmission was stolen from a French guy?
Yeah. Though there are stick snobs in the U.S. too, but not that many of them, really.
They usually drive BMWs.
Yeah. Not at all. It's because I used all of my 20s traveling for archaeology. Then used all my time off in big cities. I walk everywhere, but limited to the city. You need a car here. We don't even have Uber. Yeah, I was living in the suburbs without a car here till I was like 38 or something. I used to walk it was like a 20-minute walk to the bus stop to get into the city. I used to, at like 6 a.m. on December and January, I'd be out there walking to the bus stop. Ooh, that was cold.
I can technically walk everywhere that's relevant in my city, but I just don't feel like it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough walk. It's tough out there. And the suburbs really aren't built for walking, but there's places to walk around here. It's very hard to find stick shifts anymore. I guess I'm a stick snob. Do you drive a stick shift? If you drive a stick shift, you must be a stick snob. I'm waiting for robot cars to drive me. See, I'll take robot cars too. I'm okay with that.
Well, stick shifts are still about depending on a car, $1,000 cheaper than autos in Europe. So
they're over. When I was buying my car in 2009, they were about $1,000 cheaper, but I still wasn't buying one.
Yeah, the thing is, if you live in the Northwest, you probably do need a stick shift because the geography is different. I mean, if you live in anywhere in the Midwest, everything's flat. Yeah, the car just goes.
Right.
But if you drive in the Northwest, you need a stick shift.
Sleepy does drive a cheap car with a stick shift. Look at that. So there's really no such thing as a cheap car anymore.
Yeah, the cheapest car in the U.S. is being retired this year because nobody wants small cars in the U.S. anymore.
It is crazy. It is, as my friend once said, it's an arms race out there for who has the biggest car. It's nuts. Stick is a nuisance in hard city traffic, but driving automatic is boring. I'm okay with boring. I really am. Only 5% of cars in use have sticks, and it's going down.
The U.S. is 3% actually.
3%. Wow. What's the percentage over there in Portugal?
Right now we probably have 75% stick shifts.
Wow.
Used to be 95, but now it's
Wow.
9 because a lot of new the tech auto automatic transmissions evolved a lot after when they started using electronics to select gears, because
Yeah.
back when they had hydraulics, that's why nobody liked them. And when they introduced electronics, they also introduced extra gears, because they only used to have three or four gears. So you noticed
Yeah.
when you had to brake, yeah, with the engine. But
Jared, have
it's
you noticed a lot of artists don't really drive? I have not noticed that.
mm,
Like I said, most living, 40 miles away from New York City, I noticed that it's most people, the people I know who don't drive come from the city,
mhm.
because like they don't, and it's a really strange thing because a lot of the people who live in New York City, especially Manhattan, don't know anything about the area around them. Nothing, because they never drive. If they don't take a subway to it, they don't go there. They know more about other cities that they take planes to than they know about, cities that are just outside of New York. So it's always been a strange thing to me. Like I explain to people where I'm from, they have no idea. They've never heard of it, despite the fact that it's just up the Hudson from. You can take a boat and get to my place faster than a road.
You should get a boat. Do you have anything that resembles a marina, or at least a pier?
In Haverstraw, there's the Haverstraw Marina. So there's an actual marina because there's the Haverstraw Bay that's got the marina in it. I learned to drive standard, and up until my hybrid now, they've all been standard.
Yeah,
Wow.
there's no hybrids don't have manuals. They only have autos.
Cars about comics. Comics about cars.
Mm-hmm.
Alex Toth, Hot Wheels. I associate the U.S. population getting obese with the switch to automatics.
And
Nah,
no, it's because of
it's the
cheese.
car.
It's because of cheese, not cars.
Yeah, I don't think going like that in your car is going to burn many calories.
Yeah, but it doesn't have anything to do. But using the clutch pedal doesn't burn many calories either.
No.
It's cheese. You
Yep.
guys have got to stop putting cheese in everything.
Ain't that true?
We don't put cheese in everything. The Italians do, and the French.
I once heard somebody who was in the cooking business. I must have seen it on television, one of those cooking shows, talking about it. It's like, oh, you want to know why you like to eat out? We use more butter and salt than you.
Yes, I see. I agree.
Symbolically laziness.
There was this place that I used to have lunch at when we were working when I was working 50 miles from home, and there was this steak on the frying pan. It was served directly on the frying pan instead of a dish. And so, and so it comes inside the cooking oil. The eggs on top of it. The fries are outside. You dunk the fries in the oil into it. and what I used to do when I was done with the steak, and they wasn't really a steak. It was just a flat slice of pork. I would get bread and I would put it in the oil, and I would eat the bread.
Yep. Sop up that oil.
Because it was oil. It wasn't sauce.
Just a little olive oil. That's good for you.
Oh no, they don't use olive oil for frying in Portuguese restaurants. They use sunflower oil or peanut oil.
Peanut. That's right. Peanut oil, I just heard some guy say, is the best for frying, as long as you're not allergic to peanuts. That's the worst for frying.
I think a lot more people are allergic to peanuts. There didn't used to be that many people with food allergies.
I don't know if that's true or we're just better connected now. because I used to know a lot fewer people. When I was a kid, I don't remember a lot of peanut allergies, but I was 10. How many people did I know?
Hmm.
By the time I'm 30, I knew lots of, kids that you always heard of. Oh, you don't give him. I think I don't know if it's true that there's more peanut allergies, or we just get better information about peanut allergies.
Mhm.
It's one of those things. I just could have not heard of it. Who
Jack
knows?
Daniels.
Good for what ails you. Let's see a comic book I got this week. I'm gonna pull. Oh, this is. I got like 4 first issues this week. Oh, there's Wilson.
Oh,
Wilson, how are you feeling?
A lot better than what I was, and each day just a little bit better.
Ah,
you got the New York strain.
yeah.
Yes, and it was a strong strain, but um, I still can't smell anything, but I have my taste. I didn't lose taste, so
Okay.
um, and I'm out of bed and moving around, so I've been okay. Monday was the worst day, where it
Uh-huh.
was like I was only getting out of bed to just have something to eat to keep my strength up, and then went back to bed. It was mostly like I thought it really was a head cold,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought it was just because it's the first time I've been around a large group of people like that, which has happened to me in the past from cons. Because
The con crud,
yes,
as they call it.
exactly.
Looking good, Wilson.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, I just got the 5th vaccine yesterday. So I've got a bit of a vaccine hangover today, which I've gotten with all 5 of them.
Right, okay.
But
I
it'll be
never had.
gone by tomorrow.
I've gotten 3 vaccines, and I've never had a problem each time I've gotten them.
Each time the next day I've been like achy, and at least I didn't get the chills this time. But like I said,
Okay.
it's not like it's weird when you feel sick, but you're not really sick.
Yeah.
It's strange. You're like, hey, why am I feeling like this? I'm not actually sick. Then I just convinced myself that it's my body learning COVID kung fu, like in the Matrix.
Right.
And that's kind of what it is. Your body's learning to fight off COVID.
Yeah. Exactly. So.
Get well soon, Wilson. I heard the New York Comic Con can be a big fudge booth and a luggage booth this year. Glad they are getting back to comic book roots. Fudge and luggage.
Thank you, Tim Goblin.
I'm
Uh,
not sure what fudge and luggage is, but
ah, I don't know. I'm still not all back mentally either.
yeah, you
So
got the what do
it's
they
all
call that?
funny.
COVID brain.
Yeah. And then
Have you
at the
ever?
same time, I'm trying to. I mean, I'm glad I could work from home, so it's not that big a deal. I'm
Right.
not really missing too much time from work, except for that one day. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I could be sitting there working. It's like, what was I working on?
Ah.
And my memory's not that great as it is. That's why I got to write everything down,
Fudge
especially due
luggage.
dates.
Fudge luggage. That can be a euphemism for bringing pot into the con.
Ah. Okay.
Did you bring your fudge luggage?
Ah.
Or you were supposed to bring the fudge luggage this year.
Who did you see at the con? Because I know it'd be a big social event for you.
The usual people that I always see at cons. So it's Jamal Igle,
Okay.
so Alita
I've only met him
Martinez.
once.
Huh?
I've only met him once.
Oh, I went to high school with him.
All
So
right.
we've had a bunch of run-ins, and by run-ins is that we would only see each other at conventions and stuff like
Right.
that.
Didn't mean you
Um,
were rumbling.
no, no, not at all, not at all. We always got along well together. Let's see, Michael Golden. I got to
Okay.
speak with him for a little while. Um, oh, I'm flaking on names at the
If you
moment.
saw
Alita.
Michael, you must have seen Renee there, right?
I did see Renee. I did see Rodney, so they were all next to each other. So Rodney Ramos, no
Right.
relation. We may be cousins. You never know. Puerto Rico is a small island.
Have to do the family tree and see.
Yes. So Renee Witterstatter, um, Alex Savick, um, uh, Mark Morales was there, but I didn't get to say hi to him. I did pass
Ah,
him. The funny thing is, it's like a lot of Marvel people is who I run into first. But there was a time when I would walk through Artist Alley and know every artist there from Marvel and DC because of my job at the time at
right.
Marvel was to know all the artists. And it's kind of weird to see so many people I don't know. And to me, that's kind of over the years I've noticed it, and it's like
Right.
more and more. It's like I do not know these names. Some of them are familiar, only because of whatever book I might be currently reading.
Right.
But the rest I usually gravitate first is to the Marvel people that I worked with. So
Right.
Scott
Right.
Hanna was there as well. He's the anchor on Spider-Man.
Right.
Um,
Name.
Fletcher, who's a person that I only know through conventions because he used to work at DC. He ran their conventions department.
I
And
think
then
I remember him meeting him a few times.
right. So now he has his own company to do conventions and he was
Ah,
working at the Comixology booth where I went to talk to them about setting up books onto their new system because now that Amazon has taken them fully over, it's a brand new system in loading up your books. And
right.
the downside to it is that all the books that were up there are available if you bought them, but you cannot search them out. So in order to buy our books anew, they have to be re-uploaded. Whether or
Ah,
not whether or not a company like Marvel has to re-upload something or was there, and I would imagine conspiracy theory, there's a button that gets flipped by somebody and that could be switched over.
hmm.
But small press guys, we have to upload.
You're on
And
your
again,
own.
we're on our own. And that's the thing. As the production guy, I need to do that for at least three different independent companies, and that could be a little tedious. But
Uh,
people are doing it, so it can't be too hard to do.
right.
I'll eventually figure it out
You
and
just
do it as
have to
well.
learn how, and it's like,
It's it's another tool to learn, and it's to make my kung fu stronger. That's the thing with production. We got to learn the new thing before people start going. Let's use this new thing.
It's funny. I was talking about the people you saw there. I was thinking that if you've worked for comics for any period of time, there's like 1 degree of separation between everybody.
Yes,
It's
I
amazing how small the
I
comics
I
industry
tell
really
people
is.
all the time the comic industry is incredibly small,
If you
and
don't know a guy, you know somebody who knows a guy.
exactly. Exactly. So it is that type of thing where, and you end up, the weird thing about it, I worked in Marvel between 93 till whenever I left. But the people that are working at Marvel, when I started at Marvel, is practically the editorial staff of DC now.
Yeah.
And because we jump back and forth.
A lot of the
Um, you
staff
know,
of Wizard is there too.
are they?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot
So,
of
and that's
people
the thing.
work for
And I knew
DC work
a
for
lot of
Wizard.
people at Wizard. Just because of the nature of the job of working in production and then working in conventions and stuff like that. I went to many of the Wizard parties and had a great time at them. Um, and again, it's again because it is so small that you're talking to people that you will eventually work with or may not work with. Um, I got to speak to thank you very much. I'm still here, you know. Um, talking to the people that bought paper cuts. So I got to speak to a couple of people at Mad Cave,
Okay.
and so far so good. I get to
Did
keep my
did you
job.
ask who they were?
I I was more
Like,
just happy to be out and just talking to some people.
who are
I
you
didn't really
guys?
get to really talk that way. It was more like I got introduced. I
Uh-huh.
met Mark McNabb, I think, for the first time face to face,
Right.
but we've worked together again in production for years. He
Okay.
was a colorist at Marvel at one point. So he does. I do the lettering for paper cuts. He does a lot of the production work at paper cuts. So I send it to him. So
Right.
we've worked together for at least 5 years, but never spoke face to face. I don't
Right.
even think we ever spoke on the phone. We only ever communicated through emails. So he happened to introduce himself at the same time I showed up. So we got to meet each other and then get to talk to people who actually did at one time or another work as a colorist, or so they're in the industry. The people who at least I met. Mike Martz wasn't there.
No.
He didn't fly in for the show. So again, it was one of those things where it's
Fly-in, isn't he in
exploring.
New Jersey still?
I am not sure. Someone said someplace that sounded like it would be a fly-in, but
Okay,
again,
last I knew
I
he
don't
was
know
in New
exactly.
Jersey, but I don't know. It's been a while.
I have no idea. Someone mentioned fly, so I figured he's somewhere at least far enough away that he had to fly in.
Yeah,
Or maybe he was somewhere else that weekend.
not New Jersey.
Right.
We spent the last 20 minutes of the show last week trying to figure out where the financing for Mad Cave comes from. Because the owner's LinkedIn page has a very strange 14-year gap.
Okay.
And
We never found out.
Yeah, so I
yeah.
had no more information, and I almost tried to see if I was able to call in from the road into the show,
Ah,
but there was no real place to do that because in between the time of walking from the Javits Center to go to the Abbey, I figured, oh, that would be a great time to try to call in, but it just wasn't working. That's why I wasn't able to do it. But I was trying to attempt to see if I could, the man on the street live from the con for you guys, but it unfortunately didn't happen.
let me show you the first comic I got this week. I got a bunch of number one. Let's see. Was it decided on? What was it we decided on for those 14 years? Something shady. That's what we decided on.
Yeah.
I believe. He was doing something shady for 14 years. I got this comic called Three Keys #1 by this guy who draws an awful lot like Adam Hughes.
Yes, I could definitely see the influence.
That is not an Adam Hughes cover. His name is.
And is that an advertisement that the guy's available to draw wildcats?
That's right. Shady business. That's what we decided on. Shady business. You know what? This vaccine hangover has made me forget everything I've read. Oh, this is nice artwork. Let me show you some of it. Girl works in a comic shop. They're talking about geeky comic shop. So it's a New York City comic shop. There's tattooing going on. There's the High Line, New York. I don't remember what the point of this book. Oh, that's right. Giant monsters showed up.
Awesome. I'm always ready for giant monsters.
I'm telling you, I'm looking at this now going, what was the point of this book?
You
Giant
sold me a
monsters
giant
show up?
monsters. That I'll put on my list of books to get that I never get.
Nah. Oh, hold on. There's a little description for issue 2. As the United States begins to go demonically insane, comic shop registered jockey Noah Carter and her Tiger Man mentor Theon find themselves battling even more other dimensional monsters. But what does it all mean? And who or what is behind it? The answers begin to take shape here, courtesy of superstar artist David Messina. Oh, okay, so it's comic shop girl and her. There's her lion mentor. Fight
Nice.
demons.
It
Right.
has a
As one
nice
does.
Shazam feel to it.
It
Could
was
we
pretty
see?
to look at.
Can we see that page where it opens up at the comic book shop?
Sure.
The
Hold on.
outside of the shop.
Let me go big again. There's a double page spread of her. Like I said, he's really influenced by. There's outside of the comic. I think it's supposed to be like St. Mark's.
I think
Comics
that's
or something.
exactly St. Mark's Comics, or the old location of St. Mark's.
Yeah,
Comics.
the old location for St. Mark's comic. That's
Okay,
that's what I thought too when I was reading it. I don't think they called it that.
No, they may not have called it that, but art wise and the location
Yeah,
where the
it
store is.
looks like. Oh, and they called it Mark's Comics.
Ah, okay, yep.
So it must be the old Mark's Comics shop.
Yeah, I remember that shop.
Yeah.
I remember when it was above
Yeah,
where it
the one
was.
I know you walked down below street level to get to.
Right. Before they were there, they were actually above that. You would walk up the brownstone steps, and the
Ah.
shop was broken to two places. You had the left side of the shop and then the right side of the shop. So they were two different stores to shop in. So the left
Ah.
side had the comic book stuff, and then the right side, I think, had all the non-comic book toys and book stuff. I mean, that was 30, 40 years ago when they were in the upstairs location.
Left-handed tattooer. Keep checking if she changes hands in the next issue. I'll have to see.
Hmm.
Left-handed and there's a giant baby that turns into a monster.
Okay.
I liked it. I liked the Adam Hughes influenced art. It was pretty.
I like it. It's clean and open. It's the type of art style that I like. I think that's why I really like John Romita Sr.'s art style.
Yeah.
It's that openness and cleanliness to the comic book.
Hmm. Good stuff. What? Not the greatest, written book in the world, but pretty to look at. Which is something, damn it.
Excuse me, sorry. So it's Three Keys is called, right?
3 keys, the number 3, and then keys.
Cool.
I don't even know why it's called 3 keys. Oh, that's right. Now I remember there was 3 keys that were the key to something in the universe, and they were split up to 3 people. I think she's one of them to fight off the. Now I remember. At the beginning was some long-winded explanation of monsters going on, and we're driven away and are coming back to our universe or something like that. That was just like there were. Where is it? I'm like, this is too much backstory for me. I don't need this all now. Where was it? I think it was at the very beginning. Yeah, this is all backstory. There's
Oh,
3 pages of backstory telling you about the Cthulhu monsters and how they used to run our universe and they got kicked out or something, and 3 keys, which people use as swords now. They're really big keys. And she's one of them, I think. Yeah, I forgot all about that backstory. Probably because I was like, this backstory is boring.
okay.
My friend Rob loves backstory. He finds that makes the comic more interesting to me. I'm just like, just tell me the story. I don't need the backstory. Tell me the story as story.
So is it that you want to discover the world as you're reading it?
Yeah.
That you don't need the backstory?
Yeah, that's kind of what it is. I don't need the backstory. Just convince me to like the world in the story and reveal what's going on. But what I think it is sometimes too, the creators know the story because they made it. So they want to give you all the relevant information right away so that you'll like the story as they do. But for me, I'm always like, I don't need. But like I said, my friend Rob loves backstory. He loves prequels. He loves all. I'm not a huge fan of prequels. I don't really need to know how everything got to the story I like. I can just like the story I like and move forward. But it's just a taste thing.
Right.
It's not right or wrong. Not right or wrong.
Well, I did not buy any books, but I can show.
You're
some
like me when you
recent-
go to a con. It's all about socializing.
It is. It's about talking to people.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's like I know what it's like to sit in the back of to sit in the booth and try to sell your product.
Right.
And so
It's tough.
when I'm walking, I'm either going somewhere, so I don't want to hear the pitch
Uh-huh.
because I'm going to somewhere. If I see something that I like, I'll gravitate to it and I'll go
Right.
to it. But sometimes I'm walking down the center aisle so I could just get to where I need to go because everybody wants to pitch their book.
Yep.
And not everybody has their pitch ready correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing too, is like if you can't tell me within under a minute what you
Yeah.
have, and it's not that I don't want to discover new stuff. It's that when I'm at a con, there are certain things that I want to hit and get to, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like I'm still trying to sell myself, let alone sell my own books. I don't have time to like interact the way I want to. There are days where I do go to a con where I purposely look for new stuff, and I'll hit every table because I'm either looking as an editor to see if I'm looking for new artwork or as a fan, I'm looking for a new project, a new book to bite into and like. But at the same time, there's this. It's so hard to find because it's like looking through an issue of previews. There's
Yeah.
so much there, and you tend to like certain things that
Right.
if the art's not grabbing you, maybe the story will, but you're not sure. And then again, there's a lot of bad stuff to go through too. And you see it at the table where it's like, but what are you selling me? Is it the concept or the comic book or what have you, where it gets to the point where it's like it becomes noise? So I just need to get to where I was planning to go at that particular time.
That says, but does your friend like backstory enough to read the first pages with the TV reporters at the beginning of the Spawn book? He does not like big clumps of text. I know that. He's referring to, I got the new Spawn this week. And as is, where is it? Todd McFarlane's habit. Where'd you go, Spawn? Did I leave it back? Did I leave it back over here? Let me see. There's Spawn. These big, I skip every one of these pages with the big clumps of text next to the TV.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, you know what? I don't need to read those, and I've never missed them. If there's a key plot point in there, I've never, because I remember reading it when I first got back to reading Spawn. I trudged through them when Todd McFarlane was writing it too. Now we got Rory McConville writing it, and I trudged through them, and I go, why did I just read that? It adds nothing to the story.
That
and
was
not good writing.
That was a trope that made me not want to get Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah, that's where he got it from. That was the first one to do it.
Yeah, that was the one thing, because I remember, and I told the story before, I picked up Dark Knight Returns, I flipped through it, and it was like, I see nothing in this.
How old were you when it came out?
Oh, I was in my early teens, I believe. What year was Dark Knight Returns? Let me look
86?
that up.
So I was 19 or 20 when it came out. So, but another issue is I still buy Spawn because it's the last of the $2.99 books, and there was Spawn wars going on while some guys were beating up Spawn and talking to him about having to beat him up, and so they could fight some war. And it's all right. The art's nice. The story is about what you expect. There was a bit. I'm going to spoil the end because I don't even know what it means. Character showed up at the end named Nick, NYX. I don't know if she's there to save the day or kick someone's ass, but I was like, oh. I love when there's like a big reveal on the last page of a character, and I have no idea who that character is.
See, that was a 1977 cover. It would say, her name is Nyx, but is she here to save Spawn or destroy him?
Look, we got Tim.
Exactly.
Good evening, Tim. How are you doing this evening?
Tim, welcome.
Hello, Wilson, Paulo, Jared. How are y'all doing?
All righty.
Doing good.
Wilson's getting over COVID.
I feel for you. I had it back in July, so I feel closer to you now. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad to be in the club.
Yeah.
Jared, I was
Same
15 when that
reporters
came
from
out.
issue 1. That's how long those Spawn reporters have been there.
I was going to ask if it was the same reporters or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was 15 when Dark Knight Returns came out.
Okay.
So I was at least 4 years into comic collecting, I would
Right.
say. But Batman wasn't part of the. Well, no, I was reading Batman because it was like I was reading just about everything that came after Crisis. Uh, but again, it was like for me, I just like I said, I picked it up, looked at it, tossed it back in. It wasn't until issue 3 that I picked up and read and was like, oh, this is pretty good. And then trying to find those damn issues.
The TV reporters scared them off.
Yeah. It was the TV reporters, the art style, which was completely different,
Right.
and I guess the text. It had a Claremont feel to it. That there was just a lot of text to it.
There was a
TV
lot of
reporters.
Huh. Interesting.
I was down from the first ad. It's just there was no way to get it in a small little town. I knew it was something special, even though they didn't, but nobody knew how special,
Yeah.
So
Like I said, that was under ordered.
Yeah.
I remember when that came out, and it was so under because it was the beginning of the $3 book, mini series, square bound. They didn't know how many people would buy it. I remember my local comic shop was sweating over how many they should order.
Yeah.
Same with I remember when they're the death of Captain Marvel. That was another one that was under ordered and then went like crazy because they didn't. It was the first graphic novel. It was a new format. It was $5, $6 or something like that. They just had no idea how many to order.
Yeah,
And it's funny, my shop now is like that with Bad Idea comics. Bad Idea season 2 or year 2 that's coming out. They're like, how many of these do we order? Oh, we don't know. Because there were people who were coming to their shop just for the Bad Idea comics. But they never became regulars. So they don't know if they'll be back for this round of Bad Idea comics or not. It's like, interesting.
See, Dark Knight had a little personal thing for me because I've told the story 20 times.
Uh-huh.
But I was trying to think. Believe it or not, I believe it was, if you're into wrestling, they had the first Clash of the Champions on TBS to go against WrestleMania, more or less. And it was Sting versus Flair. But earlier that day, we had been at the Mercer Mall, which was an hour away, and they had a Walden Books. And they had the leather-bound complete Frank Miller Batman there that had year one, those a Batman Santa Claus story from like the 70s or something. And it had the Dark Knight Returns, and it had this fantastic Alan Moore prose in there to talk about, So I was wanting it. And my mom was like, absolutely not. And my grandmother was like, that boy gets straight A's and all this stuff. And so we leave the mall thinking I didn't get it. So not only as a kid, I spent the night at my grandmother's house. We were very close, And I'm sitting there watching Sting and Ric Flair go at it, and it's like the greatest thing ever. If I'm remembering this right, it was some wrestling going on.
How old were you?
I want to say 15, maybe 15. So yeah. I mean, still, So I'm sitting there and I'm watching this, and I'm watching Magic on this wrestling show because Sting wasn't famous yet and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, my grandmother, who, as we went out, you have to understand, she would enjoy a beverage or two out of a can, if you will. That's why I loved her. It got on everybody's nerves, but I thought it was cool. And then all of a sudden, she's like, well, I don't care what your mommy said, you deserve this. And she hands it to me. Talk about a magical night. So if there's a fire, I'm grabbing that book. You know what I'm saying? Taking it with me.
Right.
So then reading it was quite the experience. It's one of 2 books I wish I could go back and read for the first time again. It was an experience reading that.
Wow.
Especially at that age, to go from Dark Knight and then about a year later, Watchmen, or maybe 2-3 months. I don't remember the exact timeline there, but reading those 2 books changed everything especially at that age. And it wasn't
Right.
just the hype and how everybody's rediscovered it. You just never read anything like it, in my opinion, even like in novels. If you read novels and pulps and stuff like that, these were everything comics could be, is what it felt like.
Right.
You know.
Mm-hmm. I have a comic book history question for Paulo this week. Stumbled onto some article. Let me see. What is the name of it? Did the Silver Age ruin Superman? And this article, where is it from? It's from CBR, and it's all about how the Silver Age ruined Superman. But there's one line in here that made me go, huh? Where is it? Where it talks about the comics code. Where it says something about the comics code hit superhero comics hardest. And I was like, what?
What was this on?
This is on CBR.
Here's the problem with CBR. The people who write for CBR may have been in comics for like the last 10 years.
Timothy Donahue.
This might be the last 10 days in the retro Wikipedia article on Seduction of the Innocent.
Yeah. They're the people who write for. I know it's a Paulo question. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Paulo. Go ahead.
No, but you're
it brings me
right.
out. It triggers me. You know.
Superheroes were a marginal genre during the 1950s.
After World War II, it went down.
Here's the exact quote. The golden age of comic books came to an end with the publication of Frederick Wortham's conspirial tomes Seduction of the Innocent. This supposed that comic books, namely those of the superhero variety, were the impetus for American delinquency.
That's not even close to
other moral problems plaguing the youth. I'm like, superhero comic? All I've ever heard.
What they did, oh my God. What started it were the EC comics. There was actually oh my God, what was it? A senator's wife? They were having a garden party at a senator's home.
Yeah.
And a bunch of the kids got together, and one of the kids had a rolled up EC comic, horror comic, in their back pocket. And lo and behold, that senator's wife saw it and gathered up all the other senators' wife, and all of a sudden they had a cause, just like the PMRC did with rock and roll comics and rock and roll records, heavy metal. It wears me out, man. I'm all triggered now. I had a good day, guys.
I just found that funny. I've never read anyone say that it was superhero comics.
No. But what they did is, of course, they went after. It was really molded to go after EC comics.
Yeah,
you look at it. But what they did is they had to make it look like they weren't targeted, or to make a point. He really had to cherry pick from a broad range of comics to say that he did his research. And they got Batman and Robin being a gay couple, a grown man with a child is what they were saying. They were saying that Wonder Woman just ruins women because she will not she won't be pregnant barefoot in your kitchen while you work, basically. And they're teaching girls to think. I'm like,
I just read that and was like, I can't.
This is why I might have been on Bleeding. No, I've probably been on Bleeding Cool CDR maybe 3 times in the last year, because they do not have knowledgeable people writing those articles, or they're going for the hot click, or they're trying to make a narrative.
Somebody posted it on Facebook, so I clicked on it. But
you can read the transcripts from the Senate committee hearings. They're all in this old website back in the day when people used to do websites without pictures. And it's Jamie Koval's website, and it's got all the transcripts. And I paid attention to the Marvel one because I wanted to know a bit more about the man responsible for the creation of modern Marvel, Monroe Freilich Jr. He was the guy that Martin Goodman sent to get grilled by the senators. But the first 10 minutes are like questions about so do you have comics with needles where people poking eyes with needles? No. We have weird science comics, and then we have fun comics, and it also have other magazines. And then they spend the next 2 hours grilling them, asking the guy about distribution, because that's what they actually wanted to know, because the distribution was being handled by the mafia, and they wanted to know about that, about what they used anti-commercial practices, and they were going to use that as a way to get to the mafia, just like they got Capone through not paying his taxes. But nobody really cared. The senators never really cared about the content of the comics. People still talk about the answer that Bill Gaines gave about asking about the good covering good taste. That thing is hidden in there. If you're reading that thing, a cursory reading, you're going to miss it.
Right.
Yeah. And Bill Gaines was sweating. That man is an American hero to go up in front of them, but he was sweating it. I mean, he did it. He got through it.
They say he was on amphetamines. Was the
okay?
thing.
Maybe that's why he was sweating. Yeah.
Yeah, because that was just some. There were vitamin shots in those days, and they were amphetamines. So, to perk yourself up, you'd take some vitamin shots. And they said he was strung out on amphetamines. That's why he did so badly. Let's see. Sleepy Reader says, I thought it was the Bronze Age Superman that was the weak point in his career.
That's it. That's where they changed the formula, made him a newscaster, switched it up.
The point of this article is basically that DC made all their superheroes kind of silly in the 50s, and DC and Superman became the big blue Boy Scout, where before he was darker. And that led to that being like the interpretation of Superman. Now Superman is like the big blue Boy Scout of the DC universe.
Yeah. Whatever millennial wrote that, they have to be told. The superhero stories started getting silly with World War II.
Right.
First, because all the pulp writers that were the first guys to write superhero stories for the comic book companies, they all went to war, and then they were replaced by idiots. Because that's when stuff like Doiby Dickles starts being the main focus of the Green Lantern stories.
Yeah. Well, like I said, his whole point was that Batman became darker. All the other DC superheroes were allowed to change in the 80s and 90s, but the definitive take on Superman is the nice guy, which wasn't the original take on Superman, but now if you move off that take, you're doing something wrong, kind of thing.
Okay. As somebody who can go downstairs and find my box, I don't really know if I'm answering your question, in correct context, but I personally love the Silver Age Superman. Okay, because what they did is it was a double-edged sword, but there's no way they could have predicted the future. They ended up making Superman less unique as the only Kryptonian. Right. They started telling tales of Krypton, expanding on it and stuff, and Lois went off on her own direction. You had Jimmy Olsen. They were expanding the books and the line, and they were telling more stories, coming up with convoluted ways to get people on Krypton. I mean, Lois was like flirting around with Jor-El, just saying, just want to let you know. And then they were doing things like, I love the Krypton stories. I think I can't remember when they brought in the Fortress of Solitude. But anyway, I always forget the editor when I get on YouTube every time.
Weisinger, was he the Superman guy?
I think so, yeah. But they did all kinds of great stuff, man, because you had Wayne Boring, Kurt Swan, and all these guys coming sort of out of the 50s with the radio shows.
This article was like posted to the Arlen Schumer's like Silver Age of Comics group.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of defenders of the Silver Age of Superman.
Yeah. But at the same time, I can talk about how it made them less unique and it got a little bit convoluted. But it was good stuff. There's no way they could predict what was going to happen. And then when John Byrne came on the Superman book, his whole goal was to shave all that away and make Superman unique. This was Krypton. This is it. We're going all the way back to 1938. And that's kind of what he was trying to do. And that's why we didn't have a Superboy also, because that was probably one of the first continuity, faux pas, They weren't worried about that.
Superboy.
Yeah.
Not that continuity mattered that much in 1945, but you can consider that even an example of that the superheroes were already silly in 1945.
Well, in the early 40s, they had politics with Captain America punching Hitler.
Yeah. I mean,
as soon as Kirby and Simon are fired from Marvel, the quality of the Captain America story starts going down.
Yeah. Says, I'm watching the TV series Dahmer. At some point after he's arrested, his father and lawyer try to explain the behavior is due to a story he read in Weird Tales as a kid.
Yeah.
So they're always trying, whatever the popular media is, that's what's destroying children.
Right now, comic books made me do it, Daddy.
Oh, yeah.
The video games made me do it, Daddy. Eminem made me do it, Daddy.
From a completely sociological viewpoint through my eyes and stuff, what I find ironic is when it comes to certain comic books, certain music, certain shows, certain this or that, like bounced off what Wilson said, that's always what's destroying children. The irony is that it's actually empowering them. It's building their confidence. It's making them think. Henry Rollins was talking about the first time he heard some punk songs, and it was talk about when somebody gives you aggression, you give it back twofold. And he ended up beating up the bully in school that was twice his size. And that's always stuck with me with him telling the story. I think he was doing that. I think I heard that back in the 90s with him or early 2000s. I actually still have the CD. It's on. Somebody burned it for me and gave it to me. But I always find it kind of, when you see that they're interested in something, they're reading, they're thinking, they're listening and stuff like that, it seems like that's destroying children because, they're thinking for themselves and they feel, I think it's more the insecurity of a parent losing their child and they don't even know it. You know what I mean? Like, oh, he's doing something I don't understand. It's not always that damn rock and roll. Sometimes it's hip hop,
Ultimately, it's not. They shouldn't. Ultimately, defending Silver Age Superman isn't really the point of critiquing that article. That article is factually incorrect. Yeah. Everything about it is wrong.
That one line especially made me go, "What?" I was like, "How can I trust anything in this article when I know that superheroes weren't the reason for the comics code?"
The majority of Golden Age superheroes were created before 1942. As soon as World War II starts, there goes the superheroes and the funny animals start going up. By the time we get to 1945, the superheroes are already they already hit a creative plateau and started going down in popularity.
And we got the romance comics, crime comics, horror comics. Yeah, they were digging for stuff to work. See, this back in my optimistic days, this is when I really thought YouTube could be important to talk about these things and get them right. I just never imagined in less than 8 years that these articles and the people writing these articles and talking about comics and stuff would not know what they were talking about to this extent. There's people reading that and they're not going to question it at all.
No, getting rid of stuff. Yeah, getting rid of that stuff of the official history of comics and this notion that the history of comics is completely centered around superheroes. That is totally wrong. And yes, we may be primarily superhero fans, but when it comes to talking history, you cannot put the superhero center stage. They are not the pivotal reason for doing everything. And there are peaks of popularity. There are times when other genres dominate and superheroes are a footnote. And when it comes to finding the reasons why some things were made or undone, you have to go through what actually happened and not go, since Superman sucked in 1955, it's because the comics code that ruined comics. No.
No. And somebody give Paulo an amen. I love when he goes off like this. I love it.
Amen.
It's a good night. Give him an amen. Give him a hallelujah. Yeah, I'm serious. Yeah.
Let me show you.
I had a 2-hour show with a Portuguese TV channel explaining why Fantastic Four #1 is not the first Marvel comic.
Here's another first issue I got this week. The Approach. Boom Studios. It must be a mini. I got it because Jeremy Juan is writing it. He's also an artist, but he's been writing in recent years. He was one of the creators of The Beauty and wrote some of that, and Red Mother, which is a series I really like. And I enjoyed this issue, but it's really a first 10 minutes of a movie issue.
Hey, where'd you guys go? Hold on, I've lost you guys. Oh, go ahead, just ignore me. I'm trying to find you guys. I can hear you, but I didn't see you.
If I were to compare this to something, it would be The Thing or Alien. Because it takes place in some small, out-of-the-way airport which a blizzard is moving in on. So a plane had to do an emergency landing there. So there's the people who work at this small airport and this plane load of people who they're trying to figure out what to do because, this airport isn't built to house people overnight. Power goes out. It was really well done. I enjoyed it. But then another plane, here's a little Cessna, arrives and they don't know where it's from and it crashes. And they're trying to figure out where it's from and they find out that plane disappeared 27 years ago. That plane disappeared 27 years ago. So, of course, it ends with a monster, So I'm guessing we're getting a 30 people trapped in an airport with a monster story. But I really enjoyed this first issue. But it's the first 10 minutes of a movie. And it really felt like they did a good job capturing that sort of disaster movie feel where at the beginning, the disaster and everyone's doing their job, trying to get stuff ready. There's conflict kind of between the personalities that work at the airport. It was very well done.
Nice. I got some books to show also, but would you like to hear about my day real quick to lead up to these books? Because it was the best day. I'm probably going to do a live stream out of this, so I'll Reader's Digest it here. But left work at noon because I had the time where I worked. I worked like 12 hours yesterday. I'm always whining about work, and then I just at noon I'm like, you know what? I've got flex time. Bye. And I went and changed my oil down in a town, and then I'm like, you know what? I think I'm gonna go over to the next town, and that was Abingdon. And the flea market was actually open, and it was empty. And this lady who has books and stuff were there, and she had some dollar books. Okay, so I ended up chatting up these two old ladies. Those years of watching Golden Girls have paid off really well. All right. We were there.
Maybe you're just an old man now.
Yes, that too. Okay. So while I'm talking to the old ladies, I share on Facebook a fundraiser for my stepson, right? And I've raised $138 through that for the high school band's trip to Disney World in Florida. Humble brag, But anyway, so they had this for like $1 a piece, a beat up copy of Amazing Spider-Man 79. Wow. Now it's beat up. It's beat up. Okay. This is probably in very fine condition, not quite mint.
I love that issue.
American Days.
It's my favorite one. Some of these are up. I mean, I bought a couple. Okay, $1. You know this is the significance of this one, right?
That's beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, this is the key.
Covers.
Oh, thank you. Mike Zex is just the best. He was so cool meeting him. Okay. So a lot of these are doubles. I just picked them up, because
they're Marvel 25th anniversary
covers.
I think the only one I need now is the Ewok one, and that's got such a low print run.
Right, that's the one nobody has.
Yeah,
Ewoks and Care Bears are the hard ones to find, and He-Man.
Yeah. Oh, I'm trying to remember if I have the. Maybe it's the Care Bears I need. Maybe that's the one. But anyway, this is one of the early, maybe the second appearance of Typhoid Mary. I think I loved Daredevil at this time because
of my John Romita Jr. issues.
Yeah, he based Typhoid Mary. Her look that he designed, he based it on his wife at the time. So she had the big '80s curly hair, Taylor Dane looking stuff. Apparently, she was a great character. Wolverine appearance, Rick Leonardo. Invaders. Yeah, number 37. It is an upgrade. It's better than the one I have.
I have a soft spot for those Invaders. I collected them as a kid. So.
Yeah. That right there is my first comic book.
Wow! All right,
there. That's the one that's the first one that I bought. That one and the next issue with Moon Knight are the first two comics I bought off the stand that got me collecting comics. I read comics before that, but collecting. Right. That's my origin issue right there.
Yeah, there we go. 200, same story.
Yeah. Well, Wilson, this COVID has really made us connect tonight. Okay, right? Because not my first comic. Okay, don't get me wrong, but this was for something about this, and I can't wait to read it again. Something about this book grabbed me when I read it. All right, and then I had a guy named, and I'm naming his name, Chris Hicks. He stole a stack of comic books out of my room. It had like that New Mutant Special Edition by Art Adams and some stuff, and this was part of the stack. I may have replaced this a couple of months ago, but this is in better shape. But something about this book, it was just a fun, solid comic the way I remember it. You know what I mean? Like, when this was gone, I was upset. I'm like, no, that was good. You know,
it's what made Tim and Wilson the only two Whiplash fans in the world.
Hey,
yay! There's nothing wrong with Whiplash.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, I have a soft spot for those issues because of that. You know, most of these books that you're showing, I bought them off the stands.
Just all the Daredevils are just me grabbing them and a few other ones. But this issue in particular leads to, I want to skip to the end of my day, right before I came home, not an hour and a half ago when I started driving. This is Daredevil 247. I love this issue because Keith Giffen does the art inside, right? But this is a Charles Vess cover. And I told you guys about a month ago, I went to a convention, got 20-some books signed by him, tried to get a conversation going. So my whole point of driving, and I just kept driving. The spontaneous of the day, spontaneity of the day, and finding these books is what made it a good day and stuff. Plus, I had a great cheeseburger that I left in my car. I'm like, anyway. But what the whole point was that this little shit, Lester, my little cat here, sprayed in here somewhere the other night. It happened finally. So there's a musky smell I can't get rid of. I've been tracking it down with vinegar, trying to get rid of it. So I wanted to go to Petco so I could like find this black light kit that they had, so you can find it like CSI like, you know what I'm saying? They don't, but when I got pulled up to Petco in the middle of Bristol, after spending my day out looking at comics and stuff, there is Charles Vess going across the parking lot with a Petco cart of his car. And I'm walking up on it and I'm like, son of a bitch, it's Charles Vess again. I'm running into him left and right. And I have to remember he's 71 because he's not taking the cart back. He's just taking it to the next aisle, the next place you can park and shoving it. So I walk right up and thinking about it now, telling you that guy may think I just work at Petco now that I think about it. But I looked at him and I went, "You want me to get that for you?" And he went, "Well, yeah, sure." And he kind of looked at me and I went, "You signed about 20 comics for me about a month ago, so I got you on this, right?" And he gave me this weird look, and I'm like, "Well, he's 71, but I'm not going to lie, he looked a little frail. You know what I mean? He looked a little frail. I'm not going to lie." And as I'm telling you this story, that guy, I know he doesn't remember signing my books, but I bet you anything he thinks I work at Petco. You probably didn't get it. This was $1.
Is that the
last part of me? Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think. Armageddon. Anyway,
I think that's Nuke on the cover.
Yeah, with Nuke on it. Thank you. I went blank. And this was the only book I needed to complete a huge run of my Daredevil. I've got a short box of nothing but Daredevil, and this was like sort of sticking out like a sore thumb with completing a run.
Bothering you. You don't even really need it to read it. You just want to fit that in there.
Yeah. Now, go ahead and show a book, and then I'll tell you about when I hit the comic book shop and I got to look into a collection of a guy that died, because I got some really good stuff there.
We'll show you Scott Koblish's new book, Halloween Party. Scott Koblish, we worked at with him at Marvel. He was a Romita's Raider in the 90s.
I'll be right back. I'm sorry. I got to go get a cheeseburger out of my car I left in there. I'll be right back.
He was a Romita's Raider for years. He did inking for Marvel, and he did the War on Weed, the secret history of the War on Weed with who is this? Gary Duggan and Brian Posehn, Posehn, Posehn. But he's doing some really elaborate artwork on this too. Some jam-packed panels full of lots of characters. Matter of fact, one of the characters who made his first appearance in the Secret War on the Weed is Weed Thing, and I think he's in there somewhere. Just the name Weed Thing makes me crack up. But this is a Halloween story, and it's well done. It's what's this guy's name? Scotch McTiernan is the name of this sort of gung ho, gun toting superhero guy. There he is. And he's
That's graphic.
He's teaming up with a bunch of Halloween monsters to make Halloween scary again. Because humans have been so busy shooting each other and being bad to each other that they're not afraid of monsters anymore. They're afraid of other humans. And this has made the monsters sad. They don't get to terrify people.
The monsters are out of work because of humans being monsters.
Yes.
Beautiful.
So that's what the story is about. And there's just like the artwork is terrific. Scott did a really nice job with this. And it's really this, not really in style, but sort of that Jeff Darrow attitude of let's fill this page up with a lot of stuff.
Right.
So I enjoyed this one.
Very cool.
So go find The Secret History of the War on Weed, which was very funny. And this Halloween, Scott McTiernan's Halloween Party. And I think they're coming out with a Christmas one, too, next.
Very cool.
In December.
Hey, Jared, did you have you explained the difference between a Ramita Raider and a bullpenner?
I don't know if I have or not.
Okay. It's one of those terms we know in-house.
Yeah. I just say it like everybody knows what it is all the time. I may have explained it one time. Who knows?
Oh,
but
okay.
Scott Koblish was a Ramita Raider. And those were the guys who apprenticed with John Romita. There was usually 2 or 3 of them at any time. And they would do art corrections. They'd learn about drawing comics from John, and anytime art needed to be changed, which was a lot of the time when Marvel was putting out 100 books a month in the early 90s, they were, and I think someone at some point made a list of all the Romita's Raiders over the years.
Oh, I'm sure. I remember seeing that there was.
Because they started the program in the 80s and it went all the way through the 90s. Like, I remember Keith Williams was one of the Ramita Raiders.
Yes. Rich Parada was a Ramita Raider. I think Gino DeSico was also a Ramita Raider. There were just so many people that went off to do other things over the years.
Yeah.
And Ramita's Raiders were basically responsible for the art corrections because it was quicker to do that in-house than it would be to send it back to the artist. Because sometimes it would be just a simple change was needed.
Right.
Where it was a little bit of a costume change or a fix, a turn of a head. And, unsung heroes because they had to mimic not only the penciler but the inker at the same time. Because at that point, it was all inked.
Pond Scum.
Yep.
He stayed there on art corrections for a long time, too.
Yes.
Because once John Romita was gone in 96, there were no more Romita's Raiders.
Yes, unfortunately so.
So I think Pond Scum, this guy, Scott Elmer, his nickname was Pond Scum, so we didn't call him Scummy or Pond Scum. He was on staff for I don't even know if he's on staff or freelancing, as like the art correction guy for a while. He used to do whole pages for Corey Settlemeyer for like the Masterworks.
Yes.
If they lost a page, because what would happen was they just wouldn't have a stat on a page or two that needed to go into Masterworks. So Pond Scum would recreate them. He'd have to blow up the page, re-ink it on vellum tracing paper, and match it. So, not an easy job.
No, not at all. But it was one of those things that was neat because, fortunately, historically, Marvel didn't really keep everything either in order or available easily. Or they would occasionally go, just throw that out because the executives upstairs did not like having a room for those CDs.
Yeah, Ike certainly didn't like the warehouse he had to keep of Marvel stuff.
Yep.
That was not his favorite thing.
Not at all. History was not a thing that they wanted. They'll make money off of it, but you know, they didn't take care of it like they should have.
Let's see, what else do I have here? Oh, here's one I haven't read yet. I think this is the 4th and last issue of Dark Spaces Wildfire. And this is the one that's like a heist thing. The problem is all the issues. I never got issue number 3 because all the issues of number 3 came into my comic shop damaged, and Diamond hasn't replaced them yet. So I got issue 4, but never got issue 3. So until number 3 comes in, I can't read number 4. Not like I said, I think this is the end of the series. Actually, I think it was only a 4-issue series. So
I caught the end of that, and I feel your pain. I'm very empathetic today. Yeah.
right. But here's another comics history thing that people have forgotten. I don't know if you guys have watched the She-Hulk show.
Yes.
The finale. I've heard about the finale. Is that where you're going?
I like the show, but what people have forgotten was the John Byrne comic was equally as controversial as the She-Hulk show is now. There were a lot of comic fans complaining at the time about the John Byrne She-Hulk comic because they didn't take superheroes seriously enough, was the basic reason. And I think those same people are complaining now for the same reasons over the She-Hulk show. Or, the same attitude people. They might not be the same exact people. But I'm like, I see everybody complaining on, people defending or complaining about it. And I'm like, this is nothing new. I saw all this in the 80s when the John Byrne comic came out. When did it come out? Late 80s, early 90s?
88.
89. Yeah, well, 89 to 90 there, I think. Sorry, Wilson. I'm gonna counter your point if it's all right.
Sure.
I mean, this is
go right ahead.
Not the same thing. The same people who read the comic back then did not see it. But if you go way back on my channel, probably 2011 or 12, my first video, not my first video ever, but my first video where I knew what I was doing and it actually popped my channel as much as you could in those early days, was me showing off the complete John Byrne She-Hulk issues and talking about them. Ever since that video has been on there, seriously, every couple months, we're talking 6 to 8 months, somebody rediscovers that video, and of course, thanks to the show, it's got a little bit of a pop. I have had nobody complain about the book. They all say how they loved it.
Well, I think I think that's the same thing. I call it the Shining effect.
Okay.
Where when the movie The Shining first came out, it generally got mediocre reviews or was panned. I never liked it because I had just read the book too. That was everybody's critique about The Shining. It's nowhere near as well as the book because the book was a hit right before the movie, so it was fresh in everybody's mind. But as the years have gone by, the people like me who didn't like the movie don't care anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get, and you only hear from the people who were the fans of the movie. So now The Shining is a well-respected movie that people even consider a classic. But I think that's because all the people like me who didn't care for the movie don't care. We don't care anymore about The Shining one way or another. I think it's the same way with that She-Hulk where I've heard for the last decade and a half, I've heard nothing but praise for the John Byrne She-Hulk run. Nothing. I've never heard anyone say a bad word about it. But when it was coming out, there were a lot of people saying bad words about it. But what happened is, over the years, they stopped caring. You can only keep up your I don't like John Byrne She-Hulk for so long before you move on.
Yeah, to add to your Shining thing, I don't mean to veer off from the She-Hulk. Yep. The Shining got a second life because people started reading into messages they thought Kubrick was spelling in there. There's a whole, about the documentary.
I think that was the hardcore. the rest of us who didn't like it left and didn't care anymore,
Yeah.
and the hardcore fans were the ones who kept it alive and kept praising it.
Yeah.
And kept. I think it's sort of the same with the She-Hulk, where it was very. People forget how controversial the She-Hulk comic was because no one complains about it anymore.
The other thing, and to get it back into comics, you got to think back to the time that it came out. Okay, when I popped on here, you guys were already talking about Dark Knight.
Yeah.
I chimed in. We talked a little bit about. I mentioned Watchmen and stuff, and comics got grim and gritty. Okay, you had Keith Giffen's Justice League in that whole franchise for 5 years being hilariously funny, going against the grain at the time.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, John Byrne jumps back to Marvel after being burnt out on Superman. He does this great West Coast Avengers thing. It's got the tone of, being pretty serious, superhero story. And then all of a sudden he gets on She-Hulk that everybody knew he loved, going back to the Fantastic Four, his graphic novel that he talked about. And then all of a sudden they're reading it and she's breaking the fourth wall and she's being funny. And then he leaves the book and stuff like that. They didn't get to the end in the 50th issue where you find out what John Byrne did. Was he gave you a comic book that takes place in the Marvel Universe. Those weren't She-Hulk stories in continuity. That's the Marvel in the Marvel Universe licensing her and making their comic book. In the 50th issue, you find John Byrne locked in a closet because they're trying to get She-Hulk. She-Hulk's in the Marvel offices. Right. Looking at Frank Miller's artwork and Walt Simonson's art, who's going to replace John Byrne in my book? So yeah.
And I realized too that it came out right about the same time as the Batman 1989 movie, right?
Yeah.
So that was finally a Batman movie taken seriously.
You have no idea how
surreal. Was released in '89.
There you go. You have no idea how surreal it is for me in the current time that there's a She-Hulk TV show, because that John Byrne She-Hulk show is one of those books I have talked about consistently since it came out. And then we have a Black Adam movie, and there's a Doom Patrol show. If there was something, if there was a Commandy show, I would just die right now because I'm on the plateau of greatness. You know what I mean? That's it. That would be it. If you had told me in 1980, when I was 70, when I was 7 years old, that when I was this old, I would have these things, I couldn't even have fathomed it.
I would have said, well, I hope so.
And Dr. Fate's in a movie. They got I want to have to explain to people that Dr. Fate came first before Doctor Strange. I know it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
So it's not the last issue of Dark Spaces yet. That's Wildfire. Good, because I want more story. That one's been good.
Okay.
Of course, I need issue 3 so I can read them.
You want to hear the rest of my day and show the books I got? Okay, so I ended up at the comic book shop in Bristol. And in my old age, coming up, I realized I've known my comic book dude, Rob, since 1989. Yeah. Okay? And I looked at him, and there's a guy in there, and I went, Rob. When I walked in, I was going for bags, boards, and boxes. I'm like, I'll just run in and out. I got things to do. So I walk in, and apparently luck was on my side, because last week I went to a comic book convention in Boone, North Carolina. One person had something like 5 short boxes of comics. Nobody was selling comics except him. Okay? So the universe aligns to I was thinking, great, after finding all this other stuff over the month and stuff, over the last 2 months, it's over, But the universe aligns and fixes things. I looked at Rob when I walked in, and I went, Rob, I've known you off and on since about 88 or 89. I've never asked you out to dinner or hang out or to a movie or something. I said, in the next couple months, you're going to get a message and you're going to show up. And he was like, you could tell he was thinking, because the last time I was in there, he was telling me how he's 68 years old, and he referred to me as old friend. And that might have what started this. So after I said that, we talked for a minute. He went, Tim, I just bought a collection, and you want to come back here and look at it? I haven't gone through all of it. And this is when I started noticing his counter, his glass cases around where you pay for it and everything. All the way around, he had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, 3, 4 on first print. He had Jack Kirby Fantastic Four and Thor. He had big time books in there. And that just came out of this collection because sadly somebody had died and his brother came in and sold him this collection. So he just takes me in the back. I'm in the secret room where nobody gets to go, and he leaves me. Now, here's where it comes. I'm not going to say this on my channel when I stream this, so this is an exclusive, okay?
Mhm.
But it pays to get to know your comic book guy if you can.
Oh yeah.
Because what I ended up doing was, as I was going through those books, I found the first appearance of Impulse. I have 2 copies, one side by Mark Waid. I went up there because I was helping him out. I was like, you might want to hold on to that one. That's a key book, Rob. So when I went up with this other stuff, he didn't even look them up. Okay. So
Let's see.
What he gave me for free is this 1986 Spirit poster that was in there.
Oh,
that
cool.
From 1986, because the Spirit was going to be an ABC show by
I remember that.
And the Spirit was going to be played by Flash Gordon, Sam Jones.
Right.
It never happened. The pilot is on YouTube, or it used to be. I watched it on YouTube, and it was a good thing.
There was a Spirit TV movie in the 80s.
It did air.
Did it air?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a movie that did air once.
Yeah. I don't know if it was that one. I know there was. I saw it. There was a Spirit TV movie.
Okay.
I can't remember who played them, but.
I'm going to go pretty quick through these.
Okay.
I'll give you an idea because there are 2-3 good things in here. But what he basically did is there's 2-3 books he just said a flat $10 on 1 or 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of them, he just looked at the cover price and he gave me half off whatever the cover price was. And 1 or 2 things might have been just a little bit less, right? Which I thought was cool. The one thing I will say I walked away from, and I didn't blame him, and I told him I totally understood, there was 2 first print hardcovers of Arkham Asylum. From 1989 in there. I really wanted one of those.
With the red lettering that you can't read? Dead Face. Eddie Campbell.
Yeah. All these, whoever passed away, he had some cool stuff in there. He had Thrasher magazines. Inside of one of the comic books, I found a Super Nintendo video game guide. He had a lot of great stuff. Fanzines from the 70s, underground comics from the head shops of the 70s, stuff I never heard of, pornographic material from France. I'm just saying, And this Grendel thing cracks me up because for years I've talked about people trying to get me into Grendel and get me to read it and talk about it. And now I'm finding Grendel. Yeah, this is from the 80s and stuff.
That's my favorite printing of that's got the original color in it. So that's my favorite printing of Grendel.
When I see something that's in pink, that's a punk color, not a girly cover, whatever. It doesn't bother me. That's a punk color to me. Black, red, pinks. I'm like, they look fantastic. With a forward by Alan Moore.
I got the Grendel that was in the back of Mage that they collected into.
He has $3 is what I paid for that.
Wow.
And I think it was $3 on that also, right?
That's the only one that has the original color on it too. All the other collections of that have been recolored.
There's something about these early sort of trades and stuff like this. They're different. That you don't find them this size anymore. I would love.
That's the Marvel graphic novel size. So
it's a little bit bigger. If I had one, I would do it. Yeah, I mean, well, this one is at least.
I don't remember it being bigger, but I haven't checked.
It's barely. Barely, but I mean, I'm actually going. Let's see. I was thinking what you were thinking. There was some Marvel graphic novels that this was in between Futurians and something else, and it was sticking out around the corners. It just barely. Okay, so tomato. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But anyway, beautiful. It's beautiful. But speaking of the Mage, I'm more of a Mage fan than the Grendel. I've been into Mage, and this is the one I needed for my Kamiko run, number 16. That's hard to get because it's the start of a Mage backup story.
Okay.
So when it comes to Grendel, this is actually harder to find in my experience, grain of salt, than the number 1. But the number 1's all right because that one guy.
A quick side note. You found the Johnny Quest
number 31.
31, which I looked up on mine. I'm missing it. I just saw that that is expensive when it goes. I think they had like a CG. It goes from $30 to $50.
Yeah,
last issue.
I'll send you the screenshot, but I found it for $1.79 on eBay with a minute and 30 seconds to go with it ending the auction ending when I found it. It was just pure luck. I found it.
Wow.
$1. I think it's $1.89, $1.79. But I mean, I'll send you a screen. I know you believe me, but I'll send you a screenshot. I was so proud of that. I screenshotted it. I'm like,
you're
no way.
lying to us. I love when YouTubers say that to someone. I'm like, why would you? Who cares? The guy
Yeah.
got it for $5. He got it for $5.
Yeah, but I'm so glad you looked it up and saw how much it sells for. Yeah. But that one guy that was selling comics at Boone, I ended up getting a Grendel #1 for a good price. But that's okay because I found an upgrade that I got for like $2 or $3 today. What he did, he said that's
swimming in Grendel.
Yeah, I'm winning. I'm not even that into the book, but I'm appreciative, But all he did was say, "This isn't the first appearance." I said, "No. Hunter Rhodes is dead. This starts after he's dead." He went, "Oh, okay, $3." This may complete my volume 1 of Elementals finally.
Okay.
And now here we go. I thought I got nervous on this one because he went. He went. That's a Frank Miller cover. I went, yes. I was like. So I got the Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns cover of Amazing Man.
That was a good series. I still have all my issues on my shelf.
Yeah. So here's where I had guilt. This getting older. This is the second time I've had guilt. Some people, to me, I think it's a big deal, right? Because this is one of those books I just never thought I would run across. Because it's a Dark Horse Presents #10. Significance of this. I think I got this for $1. But the significance of this is the first appearance of The Mask. The Jim Carrey movie Mask. First appearance of The Mask.
Yeah, that one was on my pull list back in the day, so I still have all mine on my shelf.
Gotcha. Now I think I've this is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons #1 TSR. Licensed the stuff to DC, and they had people who worked at TSR who published Dungeons and Dragons, the role playing game. They had those guys actually working on the books with people. And this is a run that I wish I'd never gotten rid of. I still have my Forgotten Realms, but I got rid of the Dungeons and Dragons because I couldn't stand the artwork. Yeah. And I'm going to have to look it up because I don't remember this being the cover for the one I had, and I'm not aware if there were 2 covers. So it might be a memory thing. I
just remember the artwork in that book being not very good, and like no one bought it. It was like, no.
Yeah.
I guess you had to be a Dungeons and Dragons fan to buy that, but like none of the people I know who bought comic books bought that book.
Yeah, from 13 to 18, I played D&D regularly, and then when I was the youngest one, everybody either graduated school, got married, moved away, or whatever. I tried playing with another campaign I found in town. It was not the same. The guys I played with, we had the tone of a little bit of Oliver Stone, Conan, but these other guys I was playing, it had the tone of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and I'm like, I can't do this, Batman role-playing game from Mayfair Games.
That existed.
Yeah. You got to be careful with these because I picked these up. I never got to role-play this game, but a lot of the source books and stuff are supposed to have posters and maps, and they've been torn out. So I grabbed this just because it gave me a deal on it,
Yep.
I was able to push this up. They had a bunch of issues of Clive Barker's Hellraiser. I love this series. I love the square-bound books because they look great on a shelf. There's a guy that was there, and he asked me about the book. I went through my list on my CLZ app. This is the only one I needed. It's #2, that out of the stack. And the other guy said, "Are those good?" And I told him, "Well, I like them." And I said, "There's 3 or 4 stories per book. If you don't like one, move on." And then he said, "Well, I'll buy them." And the guy, the comic book guy, charged him $10 a piece for them. And when he left, I didn't pay close to that for this. Yeah. And then my Lone Wolf and Cub. We'll go quick here. I've been talking a while. Sorry. Getting so close to completing. I think there's 41 issues of this. And then the one I took a chance on because I really don't know. You know what I mean? I know it's popular. I don't know if the books are worth anything, stuff like that. But I got some Akira. To go with the one issue I have, right? But it's #2, #3, I love this cover. That is so 80s. I'm telling you, that blue,
The early issues are cheap. The later issues are expensive.
There we go. Okay. Anyway, so that's my little haul today.
There's a new Akira box set that's out.
Yes.
6 big volumes, and it reads the Japanese way, and it's in black and white.
It's in it's in a box, red and black box and stuff. And my wife collects the manga. If I turn this around, this whole shelf is her manga that we have over here, right? So when we were at not Walden Books, Books A Million, our local one, we call it must cost $1 million because they're pretty high. But they have that one Akira box under a table under a display for manga books. I picked it up to look at it, and the guy that worked there freaked the fuck out and read over. They're like, yeah, that's a Kira thing. You could tell he's waiting to save up the money with his discount to buy it. He was freaking out on us for even touching it. And I even went back in to the check on this, so I like touched it again, and he appeared like smoke behind me. Yes, can I help you again?
Because that thing's like $100, $125. I can't remember which.
Actually, I think it's 150, but grain of salt again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I had a good day, man. I mean,
you got a lot of good stuff there.
All unplanned. All I was doing was getting an oil change and trying to find something to eliminate the musky odor of my cat.
And he found some comics.
Oh, and then when you want a break, I have my new sketch card I got off of eBay from Fred Hembeck.
Oh, let's see it.
Okay. Want to crack this open? I have Fred Hembeck's address.
I
actually just bought an art card by some artist, but they haven't sent it yet.
Yeah.
I occasionally go on eBay and buy there's sketch cards you can get.
Yeah.
Not just comic book people, but any people.
Well, I almost messed up today because I was wondering, this didn't show up that they had shipped it on eBay. So I was like getting kind of nervous. Like, he's never failed me before. So when I was looking at his stuff after trying to see when this is coming in, he's got a Space Ghost right now. And I about jumped on it. And I went, wait, Tim, you've got one from 2014 you bought off of him. Yeah. I've already got a Space Ghost Fred Hembeck card.
Since it's right here in this drawer, I will show you my Fred Hembeck AIM agent.
Yes. I remember what's the year on that? I remember when that was up. You're the guy. No, I'm playing.
What year? Does he have a year on it? Let me see here.
Yeah, what he does is that he will, beside his face.
2013.
Okay. No, that wasn't you.
I'm going to step away for a minute. I'll be right back.
This is a genuine Fred Hembeck sketch card, an AIM Scientists, 1 of 1, 2013.
Now, mine is an obscure character, but I loved him as a kid, thus he stayed with me. So when you're 5 years old and you're reading the Fantastic Four, this guy, I think he got changed into this look by Dr. Doom, I think, and he popped up in the 130s, I think. He popped up again in the 190s, around there and stuff. But the thing about it is that he never told Ben Grimm he used to be his best friend when he was in the Air Force or something. And when you're 5 and 6 years old, seeing somebody fight their best friend tears you apart. Like, I mean, that is serious business when you're 5. So I'm very happy to have this. All right, but it's Darkoth.
Oh, I don't know if I know him. Darkoth?
Yeah, he's not showing up very well, but he's purple with sci-fi boots and gloves and a demon tail.
Just reminded me, I think that same era. Do you remember Guard?
There we go. Got it.
Oh, that looks better. Do you remember that same era? There's a character called Guard.
It rings a bell.
He was a hockey goalie.
Yes.
Space. It was. I think it was around. I can't remember what issue. It was like GAAURD or something like that. There was like an extra letter in there somewhere.
Yeah. The hockey goalie. We talked about this on Fossils for 5 minutes. My opinion on how that character came about was you had a lot of people smoking pot in comics, but as we got further into the 70s, the cocaine hit. Okay, so.
I think it was like, hey, we got a surfer. Why not a guy in skates? And Guard was like in the middle of space.
It's horrible.
For some reason, the Thing had to slap on space skates and throw this doohickey into this like black hole or something to solve the crisis. But Guard was there to stop him. And he's a hockey goalie. He's got a hockey stick, a hockey mask.
Yeah.
And it took place in like Counter Earth or something, because at the end, you see the Thing succeeds and stops the whatever, and like Guard now has no purpose. And you see him skating off with a tear in his eye, and you find out it's that world's Johnny Storm. You're like, oh.
If I ever get around to where like I know I'm home or something, we're going to do a show and you're invited. Well, we're going to go through like the horrible things of the 70s. Guard, okay? Iron Man with roller skates, okay? Okay. Iron Man with a nose. The Spidey Mobile that would actually, it was a Doom buggy that would actually drive up sides of buildings that Reed bait him and Johnny Storm gave him. Johnny Storm worked on it. The Supermobile, as much as I love it, don't get me wrong.
A flying car that punches.
Yes, I mean, I love the Supermobile because I was a kid when it came out, and I remember the die-cast models that my friend had that I wanted. But it's stupid.
I just love it. Superman lost his powers, so he invented this flying card.
There you go, Wilson.
Flying card. He got a Hembeck card.
Nice.
Flying car to help duplicate his powers, and he made his car punch people. Paulo,
I have it.
Have you read any Carl the Viking? Is it worth it? Looks good.
I think I've read one or two stories a long time ago. Regrettably, Carl the Viking is not the most famous of Don Lawrence's properties because it was in the black and white British magazines. But yeah, if you can find a copy of the collected edition, buy it and try to build up a Don Lawrence library if you can. But I don't think it's easy to find, especially in the US, and
it's not worth hunting down. Gore Vidal wants to know if your Hembeck drawing is Hellboy from Earth 2.
Well, you know what? I am going to say Earth 2 because Hellboy came out in the 90s and that was from the 70s, and DC's logic is those heroes from the 40s are on Earth 2. I just noticed something about these Grendels. One has a UPC symbol and one does not.
One's newsstand and the other one's
so
comic shop.
Comic-Co made it to the newsstand. I did not know.
Comic-Co, they were distributed by DC. That's why they had newsstand editions.
Oh, okay.
Never saw one on the newsstands in my little town.
Yeah.
Here's my Hembeck card.
Let's see.
Blow them up, man. Blow them up. I want to say it's Obnoxio, but that's not right. Who is that? I reckon.
Buffo the Clown.
I love it.
Here's the back. You can see where.
What year is yours from?
2011.
Oh,
I love this, man. I think the earliest one I have is probably 2013 or 14. I've only got a couple of them. The only one I've lost is of my OMAC one. That breaks my heart.
I've got a bunch of these. Like, let me show you these two. They're superhero related. Bum bum. Where is it? Okay, this is someone I traded art cards with. What's her name? Turned out she was in Singapore. Collarbones was her handle on Instagram. So there's a Captain America. She was just some random artist from Instagram who I met. She's like, "Oh, do you want to trade art cards?" I'm like, "Sure." And I was like, "Singapore? I gotta mail these to Singapore?" But nice cards. Little Daredevil back there too. Cool. And I've got these are the other sort of random art cards I get.
Oh, I dig that. Those are so cool.
They're not. This one's from 2007. They're not comic book related. Here's one just made with stamps.
Oh, I love stuff like that. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah.
These are called. Well, this one's cool. These are called Ace. Oh, I like this one. I got this one recently. I think in the last couple of years. These are called, what is it? ACEO cards. Artist Collected Editions and Originals, I think. And these are all originals. So if you put ACEO into eBay, all these comes up. And there's tons and tons of crappy ones, but you find the good ones.
Awesome.
Yeah, when I was collecting sketch cards at one time, because I did work on sketch cards, and so you go to conventions and you would trade them with other friends and stuff like that who worked on the same sets. And eventually I started buying original ones from artists because I wanted to collect something a little more unique. So I started getting them to draw their own characters. But I only did that for like a handful because I only got about 10 cards all together.
I've gotten these all off of eBay over the years. Anywhere from $5 to $20 they go for. Like I like this. This is one I got recently. Just a nice little landscape. And let's see, Kristen
Nice
Ollinger.
watercolor,
They
yeah.
often send you their card or something in the back too.
I'm gonna have to go in a minute. I gotta do laundry and eat and probably do a live stream. But before we go, Jared, I just remembered I had a Marvel graphic novel up here. You know,
The
signed by
Raven
Charles.
Banner.
Signed by Charles Vest. That's why it's up here, right? So when we take the Grendel and we line them up, it is just. I mean, it's barely half an inch bigger. Yeah. So.
Oh, that reminds me, lining something up. Here's something you don't. Starhenge. This is Liam Sharp's Starhenge, which I'm suffering from I got my COVID vaccine yesterday. So I get a COVID vaccine hangover the day after. So I was reading this afternoon. I don't think I quite comprehended it like I would if I didn't have the vaccine. And it's got some of his line art stuff. But I'll show. I want to show this to Wilson specifically because I'm like, what did they do? They didn't have the bleed right. At the bottom of all these pages is a white line. I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but they're supposed to be all black pages, and a white line runs along the bottom of all these pages in the back end. There's just a little thin white line down the bottom. And I'm like, their production guy messed, or somebody didn't make the pages the right size. And I was reminded of to explain to people what bleed is out there. When you make a comic book and the art goes all the way to the edge of the page, you have to give the printer extra artwork. So there's 1/8 of an inch of extra artwork around every page. So because comic books don't get printed on this size paper. They get printed on paper that's slightly bigger and then trimmed. So, big cutting machines trim the edges of the comic. So you need artwork to go all the way to that 1/8 inch bigger size. So when they trim the comic, you don't end up with a white line down the bottom. But some artists don't know to go all the way to the edge.
Or what I would suspect the problem was
Yeah.
is that when they send in, 9 times out of 10, you're sending in a final PDF file.
Yes.
They may not have checked off for the PDF to account for the bleed, and they send them a PDF that visually looks correct,
Right.
but did not print the bleed with it. It got trimmed off in the PDF stage. I would suspect it would be something like that, where the file that was sent in visually looked correct, but did not have the bleed technically checked off. Because that is
I have not seen a book print, a full bleed book print with white lines around it for a long time.
Right.
So it's like they messed something up.
Yep. But it wasn't the printers. They never mess up anything.
Yeah. Someone at Sharpie Productions didn't do the production right on it somehow. Weird, but that just struck me as I was reading it. I was completely distracted by that too. I'm like, what is this white line down the bottom? This isn't supposed to happen.
But that's the thing, that's the scary thing about production is sometimes you just never know what you're going to get. One of the funniest things is when you're sending a file and it asks you the question, are these all perfectly done? And it's like, I assume it was until you question me at that point in time. And that's the first thing we do when we get the comps is we start looking through it to go, okay, what mistakes could have possibly happened as you're going through it.
Did anything go wrong? It's funny because when I started working for Bad Idea last year, they all had varnish on the covers. So I'd buy the comics, and no comps for me. I'd get them at the comic shop, my local comic shop, and the first thing I'd make my weekly video and show off my comic. And the first thing I do when I show off one of those was like, oh, let me see, I got to check the varnish to make sure it's on there right. So it's like all of a sudden, everybody who watched me started checking their varnish too on whatever comic they ran into, because they never really noticed if a comic was varnished before. But since I was checking it every week, they were like, "Oh, got to check the varnish."
Uh-huh.
Dipping out, guys. Good to see you.
All right,
Good seeing
good
you.
to see
Take care.
Bye, Tim.
See y'all later. Hope everybody feels better. Good to see you, pal.
Yeah.
Later, guys.
Take care.
Let's see. Tit Goblin says, I like Starhinge, but I gave up trying to figure it out at the first issue. I treat it as an art book now with nice pictures. Yeah, you know what? I'm kind of there with you in that the story's a bit convoluted, but I'm okay with it. I like the tone of the story. Matter of fact, I was just
Liam Sharp's art is kind of hard to get into if you're not used to it. It becomes an
especially
acquired taste.
His new style, which isn't his old line art style,
Yeah.
is different too.
Yeah, it's an evolution of what he did in his Vertigo series Testament.
Yeah. But I was having a discussion with a couple of people on Facebook this week when I don't know, someone in pop culture said something about they don't read many comics. They don't like to read comics because they don't know what balloon they're supposed to read next, which I have heard before. And my answer to that is, a lot of times is it's as if you showed somebody today a modern movie who hasn't seen a movie since 1952. They'd have a hard time following it, since movie storytelling techniques have changed so much since 1952 that if you haven't kept up with them, you're just going to be going, what's going on here? Because nowadays movies, the visuals move so fast, the sound moves so fast, everything is different than it was in 1952. And it's the same with comics. Not every comic, of course, but if you give someone a modern comic who hasn't read a comic since 1952, they're going to have a hard time following it, probably. Not all comics, but a lot of them, just because storytelling techniques have changed over the years and gotten more sophisticated. And one person, I think it was Greg Wright, said something about he doesn't think it's more sophisticated. Comics should be clear. The storytelling should be this and that. And which is, you hear that all the time. It should be panel to panel, easy to follow, blah, blah, blah. Then I said, that's all well and fine, but comics don't have to be that. Comics can be, there are comics where it's about creating a feeling with the words and pictures, but the story is even secondary. So it's like, comics don't have to be one thing, but people think they are. When people think comics, they think Spider-Man. They don't think some random weird comic from Fantagraphics. But those are comics too.
Right. I think it's one of those things is what people either grew up with or didn't, and then there's always the assumption what comics are. I remember going to my early days of going to conventions. The only thing that there was is that they were two comic book companies that existed, and it was basically Marvel and DC, or it was just that Marvel existed as a comic book company, and Superman existed as the comic book.
Right.
And that was it. I remember being in a cab ride going to the San Diego Comic Con. Just got off the airport in the cab. The guy's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And it's like, "Oh, yeah, I work for Marvel, and we're going to the convention." It's like, "Oh, you're the guys that killed off Superman last year, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." because it would just be easier to just say
Yep.
yes, we did, than it would be to even explain. Well, no, Superman's DC,
Right.
and then there's many different companies, and that's the thing, because sometimes you want to have the conversation with somebody about comic books,
Right.
but how much do they know already
You're
compared to having to like, do you want to do a whole history of comics just to have a general conversation? And sometimes that would have to just stop the conversation right there, because the person really doesn't care about comics. They really just want to
right.
talk to you about the movie.
Yeah.
And do I have any insights on the movies? And it's like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a way I do. I read the comics. It's kind of all in there. There's nothing really surprising. Going back to the She-Hulk thing, I don't know if it's because of the way I cultivated my social media. I do not see people being angry about She-Hulk, the show they just watched. I see people who are angry about other people being angry.
That's what I see too on my social
And I
media.
see that more,
Right.
is people are reacting to people reacting. And it's like,
Yes.
but
That's
I'm
what I
not
see
see
mostly on my social media.
I rarely actually see who's yelling about it. And I think
Yeah.
maybe it's because after so many years, I kind of
Yeah.
ignore those people anyway, because I do know that the people who complain the most, or who are the loudest, are the people who are not reading the books,
Right.
and the
I
people who may not actually be watching the show. And then the other side of that whole thing is that I do understand that what sells, or what gets views, is negativity. You have to be shouting and yelling, "You hate this," in order for people to view your stuff. And it's like, that's not the stuff I want to view.
I know what you mean. Where I see more people talking about the backlash against She-Hulk than I see the backlash against She-Hulk.
Right.
Everybody's complaining about the but like this Star Hinge, your average person off the street has no chance of understanding this. No chance. I mean, as we can say, from Tit Goblin here, who reads comic books and he buys the book, my brain just treats it as a new heavy metal issue. It's like your average, if somebody hasn't read comics ever and you give them Star Hinge, they'll be lost because they haven't ever, they don't, this type of storytelling is way too different from, Peanuts.
Yes.
Which is probably their frame of reference for comics. So that's what I was talking about this week with people on Facebook. I'm like, you know what? Not everything has to be super clear and easy to follow, unless you want it to be.
Right. I think it's that you have to work up to that book. You had
Right.
to maybe had
Right.
follow him as an artist all these years.
Or
That
books
book.
like this. Like this is,
Yes.
I've been an indie reader for 30 years. This is nothing unusual. Like this book actually reminds me of Moon Shadow by
Right.
Demadius and Muth in terms of tone, not in terms of plot whatsoever. So that's kind of what I like about it. I like the tone. I like the feeling. The story, that's secondary to me. It's the tone and the feeling I enjoy. And which you can, and I actually learned that from Seth, who does Palookaville and It's a Good Life If You Don't Weaken, and Clyde fans, where he was always one of my favorites. I liked him, but he said something once that made me understand his work better, because It's a Good Life If You Don't Weaken is one of my favorites. But I was kind of a little confused by the ending the first time I read it. Not confused in a plot. It just seemed to kind of meander out. It didn't have a climax. It didn't have an ending. And I can't remember. It was some article I was reading about him, some interview with him, and he said, the book isn't about the plot. It's about the feeling. And then a light bulb went off, because I was a big plot. I was always, a big plot guy, just like most people are very into whatever the plot's going on in the book. So this is like 1992 or whenever I read this. And that's when I was like, oh, the plot is secondary. That like thought never occurred in my brain before. Of course, stories were about the plot, but it's a good life if you don't weaken has a plot, but it's about evoking an emotion in you. A lot of it's an emotion of a nostalgia and feeling something, rather than it's not like you're involved in the plot and it builds up to a climax and boom, you're like, oh great, a climax. It's more about you're feeling stuff, you're feeling more stuff, you're feeling stuff at the end. It's a completely different mindset, and I had never noticed that or embraced that before. So now I'm always like, whenever listen, most people are plot people. That's just the way we're built as humans. That's why I'm always like I said when I was talking to Greg on Facebook, I said, no, a story cannot be about the plot. There is, and one of the things I said too was, we accepted in prose books that there are some books that are hard to read. There are some books that are made for the lowest common denominator and are bestsellers. There are some books that are hard to read. We don't say those books are bad. They're just harder. You have to invest more of yourself into the book to get out of the book whatever the author put. And like we accept that. It's like we can accept that in comics too. We can accept that not every comic is for everybody, and some are harder to read. They're more sophisticated, and you have to invest more in it. But like I said, that's not something that's commonly talked about in comics.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's the thing with I think entertainment is like that altogether. Is that you find what you like, and then you build from that. And my introduction again with comics is the mainstream stuff, and then I started branching out to what is either visually weirder or story, just something different altogether.
Like here's another example, Jeff Darrow.
Yeah.
And what is the name of the Shaolin Cowboy? I always kind of liked Jeff Darrow's art, but I was never a big fan. And with this last series, Cruel to Be Kin, I started embracing kind of his art. And like I read my comics always twice before I put them away. I read them when I come home, within the first couple of days, and then I read it a second time within the first couple of weeks. What I started doing with the Jeff Darrow book this time around was the second time I read it with a magnifying glass. And I pay attention to all the stuff he's put in there. And it's a completely different experience. And it's really cool. And I had to, that's something I had to invest the time and energy in to appreciate the comics more. So it's like, I just found that, that's it. You don't just have to flip through a comic, and if you don't like the plot, throw it away. You can look for other things in comics other than plot. Superhero people don't always know that because they're all about the plot, but I like to point that out every now and then.
Yeah.
Well, I always go for the plot. I've noticed when it comes to genre, I've noticed that I'm not big on horror, which is more about the feeling, but I am on science fiction, which is more about the plot. It's all about the plot, actually.
I'm not saying don't go for the plot, because I do an awful lot too. I'm just saying once you're aware that there's stuff, because I was never aware that there's stuff that's not about the plot. I just never entered my mind. So now that it's entered your mind, maybe you can, when you run into something like that, you can go, let's see if I approach this one differently. I like it.
Well, if you're into Mad Magazine, yeah, because there's no plot,
right?
There's no stories. There was this one shot with anthology graphic novel, Harvey Kurtzman's Strange Adventures, and there's a lot of ridiculous moments in there. So yeah, you're kind of course the stories are all short and there's no point to them, but they have some funny moments which don't exactly have continuity because it doesn't make sense that things appear there.
But you can
Well,
get into them.
yeah,
That's the
yeah.
key. That's the key. Early Image is a good example of feeling versus plot. Youth liked those shitty books and art because of the feeling of youthful energy. There was no plot or even story. There was here's something I discovered 10 years after Image was a thing, because I was one of those people who, wasn't a big fan of the Image stuff. I bought some stuff and other stuff, but it took me 10 years to discover that a lot of those Image guys and a lot of those late 80s, early 90s guys were doing a different type of storytelling than everybody else. Because like I said, I'm sort of a classical guy. I like the classical storytelling of, Alex Toth, John, but guys who can really tell a story through their layouts and, their panel, and how, once again, you can follow everything. What those Image guys and, McFarlane, what they were doing was they were building the story around visuals. And I don't mean they were telling the story with visuals. I mean, the pinup sort of pages were the most important part of the book. So they built the storytelling around hitting you with a pinup page. Which I didn't appreciate at the time, and I didn't even really notice. I was just like, oh, what's with this bad storytelling? But then when I reread, and that storytelling doesn't really exist anymore. It only existed for that brief period of, 5 years. And when I read that stuff like 10 years later, was the only time I saw the storytelling as something different. And I was like,
Wildcats #1, the page where Zealot is introduced.
Yeah,
it's a double page spread, and you have to turn it sideways, like it's a magazine pinup. And and Zealot's posing. She's supposed to be a space ninja warrior, but that's when Brendan Choi takes the opportunity to give us an info dump. Yeah, you have a double page spread, and the character is posing, and she has big tits in the sword. Info dump.
It's like an image, an early '90s pinup style of storytelling that I appreciated more. 10 years later, still not my favorite style, but I appreciate kind of what they were trying to do, because I could see what they were trying to do finally.
Was that only in the Image books, or did
no, it was in the Marvel book.
Did that
too.
During the Marvel time?
That whole period.
I was curious. Okay.
That whole period when we were complaining about these artists who just drew pinups and didn't do storytelling. They were doing a different type of storytelling with pinups.
They definitely were. I'm trying to think what was my mindset back then, because I did not mind most of the Image guys while they were working on the Marvel books, and I was a huge McFarlane fan. I loved what he was doing in Spider-Man, and I'm trying to think of that was, to me, that just was the '90s style that was going on. I mean, that started in the late '80s, but that, to me, viewing what went on from going from Marvel to Image, where I was able to read everything fine. I thought it was a lot of fun, but then again, maybe I was the right age for those certain books.
Right.
Where it was like, McFarlane was the king. That was great. Jim Lee, I grew to like, because I think it took me a little while to figure out his storytelling. And then, unfortunately, because Rob is Rob, he was at the bottom of the barrel in the sense of what did I like during that time period of art styles. And then I was able to follow it because I did pick up all the Image books when they came out, and slowly dropped off one by one which one that I would stay with. And I think I stayed the longest probably was with Spawn, and then probably Savage Dragon, and then they kind of eventually teetered off altogether as well.
What strikes me is I don't think anybody ever talks about their storytelling. Like, the only thing you hear about '90s artwork is people being critical of it or people being big fans of it. No one actually analyzes it, I don't think. That's what I
No,
find
I don't think.
strange.
I don't even think I analyzed it
I
either.
didn't
Bought.
analyze it till a decade later when it
Yeah,
struck me.
remembering it now. Okay, so Cyberforce and Wildcats came out here at the same time,
Hmm.
and I always preferred Jim Lee to Mark Silvestri. In fact, I was never a fan of Silvestri's X-Men, and his
Right.
Wolverine art always seemed rushed to me. Some people said, even though Image guys used to say that Silvestri was their best artist.
He was the guy who
with
could draw the best, I think they always said.
Yeah, and now that I think of it, as I just described how how Jim Lee used the pinup to throw an info dump.
Yeah, he was a terrific. Silvestri was a terrific draftsman.
Yeah, Silvestri did something in Cyberforce, which I remember in the first pages, because the characters appeared in typical poses that they did the action sequences in.
Right.
But there's a lot of background stuff in the background when they're showing when Sylvester is building up the Cyberforce universe, and they're using the TV the TV screens. Although they don't have a guy talking, they're actually showing things happening in the TV screens, and that's how Sylvester tells us what the Cyberforce universe is supposed to be like, which is not what Jim Lee did. Jim Lee was all about pointing at the characters so that they could speak.
Right. Some art needs hindsight to showcase its relevance in the era it was made.
But Cyberforce says that you get a sense of of the universe that the characters exist in.
Yeah. Well, what's weird about these were the most relevant comics of their time. So it's not like they needed more showcase. Everybody loved them at the time. It's just like in hindsight, the era became mocked by a lot of people, but also loved by a lot of people, but never really analyzed. That's what I find interesting. Yes, it's the Baywatch era of pinups.
Yeah.
Yep, true.
Sure. Yeah, I suppose that the idea was always that it was always going to be thought of as superficial. So there's
it was always. I think that might be it. It was always thought of as so superficial, so no one analyzed, no one really, and no one has done that storytelling style since then. It doesn't really exist. Nowadays, it's.
Sure. I mean, you have Mike Deodato.
Yeah, he might be the closest.
Although Deodato adapted to Jim Lee's style to get work in the United States.
I'm also not talking drawing style. I'm talking storytelling style specifically, because they all, the drawing styles can be a little bit different and come and go, but the storytelling style itself is well, I'll have to analyze it one day, maybe.
Well, Deodato is good on science fiction, so he's going to do a lot of stuff that's in the background, but which is funny because I tried to adapt Jim Lee's style to his own. But yeah, it's still 90s. You can tell it's still 90s. There's still cross hatching in Deodato, even although he doesn't need an anchor to make the stories look solid. The art will look solid because his art style doesn't need to be solid. It's more like Sylvester with Dan Green. Nowadays Sylvester with Dan Green instead of Sylvester with Scott Williams. Scott Williams started inking Sylvester when they had Homar Studios. Sylvester and Jim Lee worked in the same studio. But when he was at DC working on Wonder Woman, it was more Jim Lee. And years later, when he was on the Hulk, his natural style started shining through, and that made him closer to what I was used to seeing in Silvestri. But you should analyze those stories because, I mean, Spawn just said 300.
Yeah, that's a
you
lot.
have to figure out why does Spawn last for 300 issues.
Because Todd McFarlane wants it to. That's
that is
the
true.
only reason it still exists. So I give
yes, that is true. But if that thing was selling 500 copies an issue, Diamond would refuse to stock.
even so, I don't think Spawn was selling more than 5,000 an issue for a while. I mean, I think most creators would have quit right there, stopped doing it. Once, somebody who was selling, 100,000 copies of it, now they're selling 5,000. That's a big ego hit.
Sure.
But he still kept going because he liked it. That's what I find amazing. Here's another first issue I got. Dark Ride #1. And this one is by the Birthright guys. Joshua Williamson and Luc Bresson, or Andre Bresson is the artist. They did, I don't know if you remember the Birthright series, which was good, lasted 48 issues over the last, I don't know how many, 8 years or so. But I thought this came out, this may have come out last week, but only hit my shop this week because I meant to put this one on my pull list, sight unseen, because I liked Birthright. And I thought I missed it last week and they didn't get it in. But this week I went in and they had like a few stacks of them, 3 different covers. I'm like, all right. So I picked it up and got, put it on my pull list too, because I have faith these guys are going to do a good series. And it's about a haunted amusement park. So some guy in the 1950s or 70s, I forget the year, wants to make this new amusement park, but his boss, this, horror-based amusement park, but his bosses say, no way, we don't like this horror stuff. So he slinks away in defeat, and some sort of demon or devil comes up to him and says, so, you want to make an amusement park, do you? And then they cut forward to, that guy is gone. We don't know what happened to the original founder. But his 2 children are now running the amusement park. And it's kind of failing. The son's not running it right. The daughter comes back for some reason to try and run it right. And some devils show up. So it's a haunted it's a possessed amusement park story. We'll have to see where this one goes. But I enjoyed the first issue. Like I said, I put it on my pull list, sight unseen, because I have faith in Williamson and Bresson. So,
who publishes that?
Image, and it was a 40-page first issue for $4.
That cover looks like a more cartoony than Burton. It kind of reminds me of Nocturnals.
This is one of the alternate covers, I think. And what's funny is Bresson doesn't do very good covers. The one complaint I had all through Birthright is the covers were kind of the storytelling and art inside was great. The covers were always kind of bland. Who does this one? Does it say there? This is maybe this could be Sweeney Boo. I don't know. It's unsigned, but it's funny. This is Halloween themed. I of course got Halloween Party, which is Halloween themed, and I got another first issue, Sweetie Candy Vigilante, which is kind of Halloween themed. This was, once again, was one that just caught my eye. I flipped it open and kind of liked the girly cheesecake artwork. And it's a horror story. Whoever this woman is, Sweetie Candy Vigilante, walks into a strip club and rips a guy's head off. And she's acting like this sweet little thing, but then does some horrible things. And I have no idea where the story is going, except, and she made a giant her sidekick is a giant gummy bear. And she also did some sort of magic to make the Christmas tree come alive into a Christmas. And she melted this guy's face who was messing with her. And so there's quite a bit of gore in this comic. But, horror, gory comic, it was all right. I don't know if I'm going to keep up with this one, but the first issue was fun. That and Dynamite puts their ads in the middle of the book. That annoys me. Most indie comics do not put ads in the middle of the book. Dynamite does. I don't know why. Doesn't make me want to read them more.
Put your heads in the middle of the book so you can rip off the pages.
I'm a fan of putting the ads at the end of the book, so I don't have to read them.
Wilson, did you pick up anything at the con? I don't think he did.
You
He
know
told
what?
us.
Actually, I did pick up a few things, and I don't know where all of them are at, but I can
Buy a
show
set
you
of
what I
luggage or some fudge.
I got this print from Michael Golden.
Oh, let's get
So it's
that.
based
Let me get
on.
you.
Let me take it out of this shiny thing. So this is based on Steve Ditko cover. So Mike redid it. So it's the famous one where Spider-Man
Oh
is under
yeah.
the machinery with water on it, and it happens to have Deadpool on it. So
Deadpool pouring water over
pouring
him.
water on him. So this is one of the ones that I've been eyeing for a while because one, Spider-Man is one of my favorite characters. I really enjoy Michael Golden's artwork, and since I worked on Deadpool, it's a nice little connection to me and
Right.
Marvel, Michael, and the characters that I enjoy. From Mike Lilly, I picked up this Batman image, and again, it's in a shiny thing. So this Mike gave me because I was interested in the type of reflective printing that it's on a foil. So I was thinking of doing that for myself as an artist and have
Metallic
it in my
paper.
artwork. Yeah, so it's metallic, even though it's just regular paper.
Right.
And apparently the company that does this can also print on metal as well. And I thought that was interesting to do for or to have for what do you call it? For promotional stuff for my own things when I start doing cons again myself. And then a buddy of mine, Sarah, did this poster that I picked up at the con.
Ah, that one's nice.
Sarah Woodley Gomez. Hopefully, I said her name correctly. May have to look it up and do a correction later. Again, still got COVID on the brain. I also picked up a graphic
Picked up
novel.
COVID.
That's exactly what I picked up.
Yeah.
But I also picked up a graphic novel, which I don't know where it is, and a small book that are a book that I did the production on.
Mm-hmm.
A little book about bees that a friend of mine, Carmela, did the artwork. She watercolored a bunch of bees, and I put together the book for her. And so I picked up a copy of that just so I could have a physical copy because I did a spot gloss on it, and it was like, oh, cool. So
Gotta check the spot gloss.
I'll eventually do a haul of the New
Right.
York Comic Con once I'm feeling better.
Now here's
And
a question I have for you.
I also got this bag from Carmela.
Okay, let's see. Do you bring something with you to put the prints in?
Normally I do if I knew I was going to get prints.
Okay.
The great thing about it is that Michael, when you get something from Michael Golden, Renee has everything all set up. So
Yeah.
you have it. She, there's this basically, it's just a larger version of a comic book bag.
Okay.
To put it in. Mike Lilly, when he does that as well.
Mind the comic. Dig the
So
bag.
So really depending on the art, like a lot of artists will have these bags already. Some people will just have the print. So usually if I know I'm picking up prints,
Yeah.
I may even bring my portfolio with me.
Right.
So I have a portfolio just for conventions.
I had the coolest portfolio case in the early 90s that I made. What it was it was bigger than 11 by 17, a little bit bigger than 11 by 17, so it can fit comic pages, of course, and prints.
Right.
I still have it in a closet somewhere. And do you remember? I don't think they're really around anymore. They used to sell like boxes, wine in these like balsa wood boxes.
Not that I can recall.
So they did it in the 80s. I haven't seen one. They used to be everywhere, and then they just disappeared. So it would be like this balsa wood box full of like 3 or 4 bottles of wine. That's what there'd be burned into the wood. There'd be the logo of the wine and stuff. So I took one of those boxes, like I said, a little bit bigger than 11 by 17, and I think it was a thick one too. So I trimmed off. I slimmed it down to about 3 inches wide, and then I took fabric. I went to the fabric store and got some like bold, colorful fabric, and I stretched it over the whole thing, and glued that in place. So the whole thing, it looked like a brightly fabric covered briefcase. And then I took briefcase tackle. Someone gave me an old briefcase. I took the latches off it. I took the handle off it. I took the little feet off it, and I put all those on the case. And for years, that was my portfolio case that I carried around into Marvel all the time. And I always got compliments on it too. And they're like, "Oh my goodness, where did you get that case?" I'm like, "Got to make one yourself." And I can even remember, like in the mid '90s, I had to put the fabric on it because, of course, the fabric got old after 5 years.
Right. Yeah, I would carry, since I was going to a con, 9 times out of 10, if I'm displaying at a con, I'm going to have my portfolio with me anyway.
Right.
So whenever I picked up prints that I would put into that, or if I was going to a con where I knew I was going to pick up some stuff, I would bring I would have one of those really inexpensive plastic portfolios that you could get at Michael's, like an Iota, I think it's the
Yeah.
name of the company, that they make a black portfolio that's very inexpensive, and it's just made to just so I could just carry things back and forth and not care too much about the portfolio itself. It was
Right.
more of just it protected what it needed to protect. And usually I don't get a print larger than comic book art,
Right.
because then I just don't have a place to put it. So
Right.
once I get the print, it ends up going into into one of my large portfolios that I have for that, where I usually also keep original artwork in as well.
It says, I always thought art stores and art supplies would do okay at big cons. Yeah, they got them.
Yeah,
I've seen
there are art
Copic
stores.
Marker has set up a booth at New York Comic Con before, and they did. So did Shinhan markers.
Jerry Artorama, I believe, does or used to have a table,
Yeah.
because the ones that were smart enough to bring just things to protect artwork,
Right. Right.
and they would they would mark up the price, because if you're at a con and you got a signature of an actor, an 8x10, someone was at the con selling the
Right.
8x10 sleeves and stuff like that. So there were plenty.
Yeah, I have seen art supply stores and even art, like I said, Copic Marker. I think 1 year I saw Copic Marker, 1 year I saw Shinhan markers. I don't know if they were there at the same time. I'd like to see a video on that case. I'll have to dig it out of the closet and we'll see what it looks like. Maybe
Yeah,
I'll find some new fabric and refinish it.
I'm interested in the case. That
Yeah.
sounds cool, but it also
It was
sounds
a
a little
nice
heavy.
case. I always liked it.
Was it heavy?
No, because it was like balsa wood.
Okay, yeah.
So it was the wine came in that balsa wood. I made another one a little bit bigger a few years later, but it wasn't quite as nice because the box wasn't quite as nice as the old boxes were.
I may have to create one out of since my sister's a librarian, every now and then she will get a promotional item.
Right.
And a lot of times they're just books where we can't resell them,
Right.
because there's things printed on them that these are advanced copies. So even once the book's out, I don't know if you can resell them or anything like that. And I don't like the idea of tossing out a book, so I have
Right.
books that are like that. But I also occasionally she would get a promotional thing that advertised a book series, and I got in a briefcase fairly recently for the series, something machinery, and I can't remember the name of it right now, because they just released a TV show about it, and it came in a briefcase, and I think the briefcase maybe is just about the size of artwork, and I have to check that. I may be able to modify that into something like that, because it just sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
Being able to, because I also like the idea of just, if it looks like a briefcase, is just put stickers on it from various conventions,
Ah,
like luggage would get.
yeah.
I think that would be
Luggage
a
and
cool idea.
fudge.
Yep, there you go. That's where the luggage comes in.
Yeah. Last issue of a comic. Once in
Future.
Future number 30. I've enjoyed this one all the way through. Who is it? Kieran Gillen, Dan Mora, and Tamra Bonvillain. And it's been a good series. This is like the one where all sorts of Arthurian legends and myths come to life in England. And there's people trying to stop them from coming to life. A grandmother and her grandson, and stories become real, and this and that. And the last issue was solid, but kind of expected. It wasn't real. It wasn't like it's like they won. Well, I expected them to win. So I'm not saying it's bad or anything. It's just kind of they won. This issue was that they eventually win. It was well done. It was well put together. Liked the artwork, but it was just kind of like, okay, they win. That that just brings up to mind. I mentioned the series Birthright by the same guys who did Dark Ride, and they had one of the best endings because, much like this issue, there was a big magic war going on, and like Birthright went 48 issues. I think they won the big magic war in like issue 45 or 46, and then they had like 2 or 3 issues of them just kind of wrapping up the big magic war, and they really did a nice job of it. It was really satisfying. And I'd never really seen a story do. I guess it was sort of a Lord of the Rings ending where after the big battle, they wrap a lot of stuff up.
Right.
Because it's like, I could have used that with this. After the big battle, I could use 2 or 3 issues of them wrapping stuff up. Just because, I don't know why, but it really worked well when they did it in Birthright. So now it's like, I think more comics should do that instead of just having the big climax where they win.
I think that's one of the things that I noticed entertainment-wise is that I remember watching movies where once the big battle happened, that's it. It ends. Credits.
Yeah.
And you don't get of what happens now, where do people go, and stuff like that. And when you were just talking about it, I was wondering if it's something that needed a Lord of the Rings ending where you get everyone's story and then what eventually did they get to do.
They did a slight bit of that with one character, but not really. They did a slight bit of to be continued, but not really.
Right.
Matter of fact, Kieran Gillen in the back even said, "I hate to be continued," so I wasn't doing that. The to be continued ? Right. Like, I didn't want to do that, but he kind of set it up so that if he wants to tell more stories, he can. But
yeah, it's one of those weird
it was
things
a good
about
series from
endings.
beginning to end.
That's the thing about endings. Like, what is a satisfying ending?
Yeah.
Because you kind of want to know, especially if you lived with the characters for a long time, you kind of want to know where they may eventually end up. But sometimes it might be where you're just like, okay, it ended, it's fine, it's here. But maybe their stories can continue in your head. But sometimes you kind of want to be told, because that's one of the things that I disliked about certain stories where it's like, you fill in the ending. It's like, no, that's not my job. I don't want to fill in the ending.
Well, what was so good about Birthright was, like I said, they were in this big magic war between 2 worlds. And it kind of, magic appearing on Earth kind of changed Earth. And all the characters changed from the very beginning of the story to the end. So it kind of wrapped up what all that change meant for the characters and what they were going to do now that they're changed. That's what made it so good to me on the end of that one.
Okay.
So, like I said, it's one of the, sometimes you need a Senator and Mrs. Blutarski to tell you exactly what happens at the end of Animal House. I don't know if you remember that one.
Oh, I read it the one time, and that was it. And that was probably
Well,
11th
at the
grade.
end of the Animal House movie, which was a comedy, they gave you the what happened to all the characters like 10 years or 20 years
Oh,
later.
Animal House. You said Animal.
Animal House.
I'm thinking Slaughterhouse 5 for some reason.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Animal House.
Yeah, I think that worked fine, especially for that kind of a
for that kind of movie, it was good. One last comic this week was Love Everlasting #3. And this is the one that's done like an old romance comic, except there's something weird going on in the background. It keeps playing it like a straight sort of romance comic, and then at the end showing you these characters know they're in a romance comic, something weird's going on. But so far, all 3 issues, they haven't really given us a hint of what's really going on. But once again, the artwork and the storytelling, Tom King is the writer. Eliza Charretier is the artist. How do I say that, Paulo?
Charretier.
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 Charretier. She's a terrific artist. She's got this sort of Paul Dini. What's that Batman guy's name? All of a sudden, I can't remember the animated Bruce Timm style. And her story, this is an example of the type of storytelling that he was taught that's easy to follow and nicely done. And this is, it's broken down into 3 parts, like there were 3 8-page romance comics. And it's really well done as sort of an homage to romance comics. And it's really well done as sort of this story that makes you go, what's going on here for real? So I've enjoyed all 3 issues of it. And it's on my pull list. So we'll see. I have no idea what direction they're going with this. But this one was, the girl and her school librarians. It's tough to describe. It's romance comic-esque. It really is. This high school girl who's trying to decide if she's going off to college or marrying her high school boyfriend. And then someone with a gun shows up at the end, and you're like, who's this person with a gun? That has nothing to do with the rest of the story.
But there's at least that mystery that's keeping you coming back. Yeah.
Even if they have no idea what they're doing with the mystery, it's still done well. It could be a Gerber elf thing where you never find out. Classic moments in reading comics when I was a kid. The Gerber elf.
Have you talked about that here?
I don't know. I think we've mentioned it with Tim before. He calls him the elf with the gun. That's the other name he was known by.
Right. Yeah, that's what happens when you have a writer on a story who starts something and you get rid of the writer.
Well, he killed the elf, I think, before there was, for those of you who don't know, in the 70s and the Defenders, through like the issue 30 to 50 or something, there was an occasional subplot where you'd see this elf with a gun show up. Steve Gerber wrote it. That's why it was known as the Gerber elf. And all of a sudden he'd show up like somewhere in a gas station and shoot someone on the toilet in the gas station. And this happened like 3 or 4 times. And everybody was like, what is this subplot? What's this Gerber elf? Then finally he goes to shoot someone and he gets run over by a truck and dies. And no other explanation was ever given.
Was that still Gerber? Because he left.
I think Gerber killed him. But then someone else picked up the story like 2 years later.
I was under the impression that he was just killed off because Gerber was already gone. That the other writer.
I'm gonna have to look into my old issues and see. I haven't read them in so long that I
remember having a conversation with somebody about it, and they were like, "Yeah, they killed he was killed off by the new writer because he had no idea where Gerber was going to go."
To my memory, Gerber killed him off before he left. and the whole thing was meant to be pointless.
Was it? Because
Yeah.
I thought that the elf was going to become the next big bad, and that's how he was setting
No,
it
I think
up.
the whole at least that's what we thought. All of us who were reading them, my friends and I, who were reading the Defenders in the 70s, because it made sense that Gerber would be the guy to make this pointless subplot.
Okay.
I never read anything to the contrary, but I haven't read that much about the Gerber elf. So
Right. I've only ever talked about it with other fans,
right,
and like I
right,
didn't. I'm almost sure I read one of the issues with it, and because I wasn't really collecting Defenders, so it was like if I was to see it, I would pick it up
right.
because it was already done by the time I was collecting. So every time I would see an issue of the Defenders in the wild, I would just pick it up. So I know I might have read it and never knew where the story was going to go anyway. But I remember that talking to a buddy of mine who's a big Defenders fan,
Right.
we just had this whole conversation about it in the sense of storytelling, how to put subplots into your comics that will pay off later. And that
Right.
was one that just never, well, yeah, I guess it did get paid off
We
because
were always under the
they ended
impression
it
that
with
that
that.
was on purpose, that it never paid off.
And again, that's one of those comics mysteries. Where did it
Well, see,
go?
the internet knows one of these nights.
Oh, I'm sure it'll pop up, or someone will have a theory about it.
All right, well, we should wrap up for the evening. I'm getting plenty dizzy here from my vaccine hangover, which is better than an actual COVID hangover, I got to tell
Yeah,
you.
I think so. I think so. But
I know I'll feel fine tomorrow.
Yeah. All right, so you guys have a great weekend, and see you
All
hopefully in
righty.
a week.
Nice talking
right.
to you all.
See ya.
And we will see
Take care,
you
everybody.
guys next week out there in the big wide world. Ta-ta.
Ta-ta.